Have a lot of people here this evening. This is great. Oftentimes we sit up here and we only have 5 or 6 people in the audience. So I want to welcome all of you this evening. Let's call the Johnston City Council meeting number 23-07 to order. Sam, roll call, please.
Councilmember Evans,
Here.
Martin,
Here.
Burkhart,
Here.
Cope,
Here.
Ready.
Here.
Again, I want to welcome everyone that is in the audience this evening with us. If you're here for an item that is on the agenda, we would ask for you to wait for that item to come up and address the council at that time. If you're here for an item that is not on the agenda, there'll be an opportunity under public communications, which is coming up here very shortly, to address the council. Next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. And since Sam is new employee here and she's doing this solo tonight, we're going to ask her to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Yeah. Next item on the agenda is the agenda approval. Do we have any changes to the agenda, Mike?
None this evening, Mayor.
Council, any changes? There was one that was brought to my attention. It was just a scrivener's error. Under the consent agenda, L, the number of that purchase order is actually 21-856 instead of 516. With that change, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion. Sam, vote please.
Martin,
Yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to public communications. We have a whole slug of scheduled public communications this evening. We'll start at the top. We have some swearing in, some oath of office for our Johnston Grimes Metropolitan Fire Department members. Chief?
Mayor and council, it is my great pleasure to have the mayor issue some oaths of office to one of our firefighters, one of our lieutenants, and 2 of our captains. So most of you recall that in the past, we've done a big swearing in during the summer, usually out at the middle station, Station 38. Because we were doing that transition from a combination department to a fully career, we never got that done. And so trying to get schedules to align and nobody to blame but me for this delay. But we've got Samantha Reisinger taking her oath of office tonight for firefighter.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Samantha Reisinger.
I, Samantha Reisinger,
Solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
to support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and that I will faithfully and impartially,
and I will faithfully and impartially,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
discharge all the duties
discharge all the duties
of office of firefighter
of office of firefighter
in Johnston and Grimes, Iowa,
in Johnston and Grimes, Iowa,
as now or hereafter
as now or hereafter
required by law.
required by law.
Congratulations.
And also a tradition is to have a family member actually pin the badge on our personnel for hiring and promotion. So I think her mother is here and her father. So
I just talking everything. I don't know where. I guess.
now if we could have Lieutenant Ryan Wheeler come forward, please.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Ryan Wheeler,
I, Brian Wheeler,
solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and that I will faithfully and impartially,
that I will faithfully and impartially,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my abilities,
discharge all the duties
serve all the duties
of the office of lieutenant
of the office of Lieutenant
in Johnston and Grimes, Iowa,
in Johnston and Grimes, Iowa,
now or hereafter,
now and hereafter
required by law.
required by law.
Congratulations.
And now if Ryan's wife would like to come up. All right, we have got two captains, but we'll do one at a time. So Captain Nick Hutchinson.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Nick Hutchinson,
I, Nick Hutchinson,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
that I will faithfully and impartially,
and impartially,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my abilities,
discharge all the duties
discharge all the duties
of the office of captain
of the office of captain
in Johnston and Grimes, Iowa,
in Johnston and Grimes, Iowa,
now or hereafter,
is now or hereafter
required by law.
required by law.
Now, if Nick's wife would like to come up and pin the badge, please. Yeah.
Pictures. Do you want one with Mayor?
And now if we could have Captain Nick Stewart come up, please.
Catch that both of our captains' first names are Nick. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Nick Stewart, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and that I will faithfully and impartially, to the best of my ability, discharge all the duties of the office of captain in Johnston and Grimes, Iowa, as now or hereafter required by law.
And now Nick, is the whole family or just your daughter coming up? Great.
Before I take my seat, I just want to say thank you to all of our firefighters. We know what their job. You're out there fighting fires, and you're also more important, and probably in more situations, responding to emergency medical calls. Our residents would not be safe without you being here and going to work every day on their behalf. Thank you very much. Sorry, give me a minute to find my paperwork here. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the recognition of the boys wrestling team at the 2023 IHSAA State Wrestling Championship. Do we have our wrestlers here? There they are. First of all, thank you for being here with us tonight. It's been a great year for all of you, right? Well, we're just really pleased to have you here in our presence this evening. I just want to share, wrestling is kind of one of those mystery sports for me. I've been a runner, I've learned how to swim, but I've never learned how to wrestle. And so, you're going to have to tell me a little bit about wrestling. How do you wrestle? Any tips? I mean, if I ever wanted to wrestle, what would you suggest? Okay. Any other tips? How did you guys get into wrestling?
My dad.
Parents, dads wrestled mainly. That's how we got into it. Or, siblings too. But yeah.
I started wrestling like really late, and it was because like his family and one of our other wrestlers, not here, Colby Gibbons, his family, they really got me into it.
What has wrestling taught you?
It taught like a lot how to like take care of yourself, discipline, things like that. 'Cause it's a hard sport. It just taught us a lot how to get what you earn.
Yeah, I'd say just a lot of hard work, a lot of time and commitment into the sport.
On top of that, also teaches you how to lose, how to be okay with that.
Hard one to learn, but that's. I grew up in Northwest Iowa and we didn't have a wrestling team up there. And so my first real contact with a wrestler was with Dan Gable. Do you know who Dan Gable is? And that, of course, was years after he wrestled. And I think it was even after he was a coach at Iowa. But, just an incredible person. I think what I learned from him, just in listening to him, is discipline is so important to the sport. And discipline, just disciplining yourself throughout your lifetime will really help you accomplish your goals. I pulled off a quote, and I don't even know where it came from, off of, everybody Googles, right? And I wrote in, wrestling, life skills. And this is the quote that it came up with. And I think it sums up what you guys have already said. It teaches teamwork, but on the flip side, it also teaches independence. Wrestling teaches youth about the values of working hard and the importance of setting goals and working hard to achieve those goals. Like life, youth wrestling teaches kids that you get out of it what you put into it. And I think that's exactly what you shared with us this evening. So anyway, I just want to congratulate each one of you for the great job that you did this year. Now you're going to have to identify who you are. I'll start with the seniors first. Kaya Fox. Is it Kaya? Kaya Fox. Senior Kaya Fox. He won 5th place. Do you want to tell us about that experience?
So it was a fun experience. First time at the state tournament. Didn't get to go last year, but I guess I had a couple upsets and wrestled my best. So, yeah.
Congratulations. Senior Sam Zindel. Fourth place.
It was a really good experience. It was my 4th trip to the state tournament. It's the highest I placed, so be happy with how my career turned out.
Junior Braden Blackerby. State runner-up.
It was my 3rd time at the state tournament, 2nd time placing. Oh, I just went out there and did what I had to do, I guess.
Sophomore Joshua Anglo.
It was a pretty awesome experience. Winning that last match, that place match. I mean, the night before I was not in a good mindset, but after I won that match, it was probably one of the best feelings I've ever felt. It was pretty awesome. So yeah.
And sophomore Jacob Harrison. And he is the state champion.
It was a really awesome experience. Second time at the state tournament last year. I got 3rd place, and this year to finally reach my goal of being a state champ. There's just nothing like it. It was awesome.
That's fantastic. Well, again, we are so proud of all of you. I brag about the kids here in Johnston at our Johnston High School all the time. I'm so proud to be able to share with everyone that our kids excel in everything. They excel in academics, they excel in the arts, and they excel in athletics. So, I mean, you're just a great example of the wonderful kids that we have in this community, and the fact that you work so hard and you set goals and you work to achieve those goals. So we are just incredibly proud of you, and we're just so pleased to have you here this evening with us. So with that, I think we need to take some pictures, right? Yes, I did. Oh, that's right. We have certificates for you.
We can hold that, Jane.
Are you? And Sam. There you go. We need to take a picture of the council. Yeah.
Have the coaches come up too, they're in the back.
Oh, yes, we need to invite the coaches. Before we take a picture. Coaches, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'm Aaron Tecklenburg and this is Jeff Helgeson. Both of us here on staff. No, just really proud of the guys. Really special moment to invite them here. We're just really appreciative that you were able to recognize them. And I'm biased, but I agree with everything you said. And these guys said it's a really demanding sport. It requires academic focus and doing the good things and being a good citizen, but it also requires a heck of a lot of work. And that's why I love coaching wrestlers.
Yeah, it's extremely humble and thankful that you would recognize our sport and high achievement of these young people. This is humbling. Thank you.
Well, that's the easy part.
The great wrestlers that they are. Okay. We need to put me in the middle. We need to get the time.
Guys, look, great black and gold.
Okay, the next item under public communications is to recognize Johnson resident Virginia Solberg on receiving the Iowa Urban Forestry Award of Outstanding Career. Or a volunteer.
It's a career too, right?
Her career as a volunteer. Thanks.
Can I say a few words too?
Absolutely.
It's my honor to be recognizing Ginger for this award. Obviously, this is an award for her work in our urban forest, in trees in general. But you could make an argument that there's all kinds of different categories that we could be honoring Ginger. Her involvement with the city government over how many years now? 20 years plus here. Goes all the way from planning and zoning all across the spectrum. So we're honoring Ginger this evening for this, but her work is tireless, and what she's done for this city has been amazing over this time period. So thank you.
Those of us that know Virginia, we call her Ginger. To add to what John has already said, the staff did a nice job of writing up some additional information about Virginia. She's an incredible member of our community. She just works so hard to make Johnston the best place that it can possibly be to live in and to raise a family. In addition to being here this evening to be recognized for the Iowa Urban Forestry Award, she is also on our tree board. She has been involved with the trail committee, working to connect trails throughout our community and with other communities. She has been one of the founding members of the Johnston Climate Committee, focusing on improving the climate in Johnston by cleaning up Beaver Creek, planting trees, and working towards requiring contractors to return top-grade topsoil to newly constructed sites. She's not afraid to advocate for topics impacting our environment. She has worked tirelessly to reduce invasive species in our community, including the garlic mustard and honeysuckle in our natural resources area. And I could go on, but I just want to say thank you, Virginia, for everything that you do in our community. You've done it for a long time, and we couldn't have done everything without your help. So really do appreciate it. Is this your award? So this is what the award says. The Iowa Urban and Community Forestry Council salutes Virginia Solberg, Johnston, Iowa, 2011 Urban, 2011. Oh, okay. 2023 Urban Forestry Volunteer of the Year Award for outstanding urban forestry volunteer work in the city of Johnston. So one of many recognitions that Virginia has had through the years, again, because of all of her great work and her willingness to volunteer in so many different ways. So congratulations. Councilman Shiny?
Please.
good that you just.
Yeah, I know.
come out and say that. These are Caitlin Clark.
There you go.
Yeah, there.
Didn't know where you were going.
Okay, we have three proclamations here, and I think maybe to save a little time, I won't read through all of them. Janet, do we have anybody here to receive any of them? Ike, okay. So the first one is proclamation, the 2023 Kites on the Green proclamation. And as probably all of you in the audience know, every year we have, for the last 10 years, this is the 10th anniversary of our Kites on the Green up at Johnston Commons near the library. This year, it will be on, I'm looking at the bike. This year, it will be on Saturday, May 6th, from 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock. And again, because it is our 10th anniversary year, you know, we're going to have a lot of exciting things going on all day long. We're going to have kite displays, kite fighting, free kite building, bull racing, live music, inflatable obstacles course, stormwater best management practices, members of the Johnston Police and the Johnston Grimes Fire Departments, the Iowa National Guard, food trucks, sidewalk chalk, and much, much more. So lots of things going on all day long. We couldn't do any of this without the support of our sponsors. And so I just do want to mention them real quickly. And we have a long list of sponsors this year, which is just incredible because again, they have, you know, contributed monetary as well as volunteer resources to make the event what it's going to be. The sponsors include Viridian Credit Union, Metronet, Snyder and Associates, Mid-American Energy, Foth, OPN Architects, Silver Spoons, Johnson Hy-Vee, All-Star Concrete, Pet Supplies Plus, HR Green, Delta Dental of Iowa, Prairie Meadows, Charter Bank, Child Serve, and Knapp Properties. I think the you know, the breadth of the sponsors that we have just support the fact that, you know, this is a very family-friendly, free event for everyone in our community as well as beyond our community. We've been surprised in the past by, you know, people who have participated, who have driven long distances from out of state to come to Kites on the Green. So if you haven't been to Kites on the Green, this would be the year to come and see what it's all about. If you have been there, you need to come back because it's even bigger and better than it's ever been before. So I would just encourage you all to be there and look forward to seeing you. And there won't be any rain this year. Before I go off that subject, these are the t-shirts this year. They're fantastic. Janet, where can people get these if they want them?
So we will have very limited sizes at the event because of it's our 10th annual year. We only ordered a select few sizes. If you do want to order some, we have we have long sleeve t-shirts, sweatshirts, baseball caps, stocking hats, because you never know what it's going to be like in Iowa. The store will close on May 8th. You can find it on the cityofjohnston.com/kites on the green, or it's right on the homepage at cityofjohnston.com. So get your orders in by the 8th because all we will have at the Kites on the Green event are those t-shirts, but they will be in limited sizes. So we have kid sizes and adult sizes.
And they can also go out on our website and get the information about all of the events happening that day. Very good. Okay, we also have a proclamation declaring February 28th, 2023 as National Arbor Day. And again, you know, we all know what trees contribute to our community. For Councilmember Martin, do you want to talk about trees?
Trees are, you know, vital to a healthy community. They provide oxygen, they block wind, they contain, they help reduce pollution. They mediate the effects of hard driving rains. They help with the stormwater. They're nice to look at. We love to sit under one. They're beautiful, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We don't appreciate them enough because, you know, normally we have good Iowa soil. We need to start changing our point of view about trees and maybe putting them first. When it comes to the environment, I don't know that we could survive without our trees.
And the reason why I turned to Councilwoman Martin to share that with us is because Councilmember Martin is a constant reminder to all of us on the importance of trees. And so, you know, we have adopted policies and we've made decisions up here at the dais that reflect, you know, the viewpoint that trees are important, and Councilwoman Martin gets a lot of credit for making sure that we give it a lot of thought and make those kind of decisions. So, okay, and the last one is a proclamation declaring May as Bike Month, and it talks a lot about the benefits of bike. The proclamation itself talks a lot about the benefits of biking as well. But Janet, remind me, when is the mayor's bike ride? Every year for the last several years, 8 or 9 years, we've had a bike ride in the month of May. We invite everyone in the community to join us.
So the mayor's bike road will be Saturday, May 13th. We moved it to Saturday a couple years ago so that we can have more families here at the event. So it'll start out here at around 11:30 at City Hall. We will make our way over to Terra Park, and there's free lunch if that inspires you to come to the event. And usually it's, you know, a great event, a small, short little jaunt over there to Terra Park. So we hope to see you.
It's a lot of fun. So if you're a biker or even if you're not a biker, come out and join us. It's a short ride of about 3 miles, and we end up at Terra Park and have a wonderful time socializing with each other and eating turkey sausages or whatever, turkey bratwurst and chips and all kinds of good stuff. So please join us. And the last item on the under public communications is the presentation from Mid-American Energy for the Trees Please Grant Program. There he is.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Kelly Swenson. I'm excited to be here again this evening. This is my 10th year of coming here to present a check to the city for our Trees Please program. So I think we picked a good night, all the discussion about trees and the benefits and all the things they do for our community. So Mid-American's proud to be a community partner of Johnston's, and I have a check for $3,000 that can go toward planting additional trees. So. And John and I were already discussing opportunities where I could bring a group of employees out to come help you plant them. So we'll get that on the books.
Everybody want to join?
Sure. Trees, please.
It'd be on the top of my head. And we'll get that in a full report back.
Okay, we are still under public communications. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda?
Hello, thank you, Chris Conmey, 5961 South Wynwood. I just wanted to say thank you first for providing recordings to the public. I get a chance to watch them sometimes later, and it helps me. And I was watching the last work session and just wanted to give a comment about the financial year 24 budget and just provide my support for keeping the aquatics study in the budget. I recently moved to Johnston from Ames, and I've struggled with aquatics access since I've moved down here. And I've tried to access a lot of aquatics through community education, which has been doing a great job. but they've been limited with what they've been able to offer. And I've struggled to be able to go to other facilities in the area just due to time constraints and some financial causes that way. In addition, I was just going to make a quick note that I also have noticed with community education is we're seeing, just to make note, swim lessons I think are an important thing. And I noticed that the next round of swim lessons that don't even start till May 1st have already filled up, for example. So I'd love to provide any additional comment in the future, and I probably will send some more things, but I just hope that you guys will consider it once we get to the financial year 24 budget and can grow. One last comment on if we take a look at what's happened in Ames. I think it's also important to continue working with the school district and such. Ames recently lost access for the public to the high school pool when they built the new high school. And now they're struggling to build a new indoor facility. And I think that will help us because I know Councilmember Reddy, you were having some concerns about financial cost to us, especially when we see these large facilities. I'm not necessarily looking for something that's a massive water park, but I'm hoping to be able to provide, access to swim teams, or myself for adult swim teams is where I came from, and water polo and other things such as that. So I think there's some stuff that we can do here, and I'd love to see the community grow here, especially with other recreation opportunities. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda, or no, we'll go to the public hearings. We have four public hearings this evening. The first is to conduct a public hearing on proposed acquisition of property by eminent domain, Northwest 100th Street from Northwest 62nd Avenue to Northwest 54th Avenue, resolution number 23-76, authorizing acquisition of property by eminent domain. And we'll open this public hearing at 7:43.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Adam Ridge, provide a little background. I've got a map up here on the area that we're looking at. But Northwest 100th Street is a 2-lane rural road segment between 54th and 62nd. And it's scheduled to be improved to a 4-lane divided urban section to match the design to the north and to the south. With that will come, we'll solve some capacity issues that we are currently experiencing on that roadway. We'll add a shared use path for pedestrians and bicyclists, as well as have some improved safety features on the roadway as well. So during that design phase, there was a need for fee title that is shown in blue on the map here, just east of the pond, and then some temporary construction easement to reconstruct 100th Street. You can see in the blue area, part of that shared use path sits in there. The remainder of that is to slope the ground and tie it back into the property. Adam Ridge and city staff have met multiple occasions with positive discussions taking place each time. The last couple of meetings have been real encouraging, been attended by Mayor Derenfield and Councilman Reddy and Councilman Evans. With that, we continue to work towards a positive solution there at Adam Ridge for the HOA and the city. City staff is working towards that resolution to hopefully prevent a hearing even taking place. But staff tonight would recommend approval of the proposed resolution to keep the project on the Iowa DOT letting schedule. That would be later this August. We reviewed that timeline earlier in the work session, so I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council have any questions for Matt? This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the council? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing at 7:46. We have a motion to approve resolution number 23-76.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Sam, vote please.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Ready.
Yes.
Motion passed. Item 4B, conduct a public hearing and consider approval of the first reading of ordinance number 1095, amending the official zoning map for 18.26 acres from PUD to C1 and C2. The subject property is located around the intersection of Northwest 55th Avenue and Merle Hay Road, PZ case 23-06. And we'll open this public hearing at 7:46.
There is, excuse me, there's interest in developing property at the southeast corner of Merle Hay Road and Northwest 55th Avenue for a car wash use. The property is currently zoned PUD, allowing restricted C3 uses. However, the PUD is written poorly. It's not entirely very clear, and there's some language in the PUD that implies car wash use is not an allowed use of the property. Staff has undertaken a process to identify PUDs in the community that could be potentially eliminated in favor of rezoning to a baseline zoning district. This PUD is one that was identified to be eliminated. So the current interest in developing the car wash use has actually moved this rezoning forward or moved forward the possibility of eliminating this PUD at this time. You could generally consider the rezoning a down zoning because it currently allows C3 uses, but it also wipes clean some uses that were specifically called out as prohibited previously. And those prohibited uses were C2 uses. So we would be, again, eliminating the possibility for C3, but in turn allowing all C2 uses. And C2 would be an appropriate use for properties on either side of Merle Hay Road. Adjacent land uses, when we look at this property to the north, are commercial office uses and planned unit development. The planned unit development to the north allows for uses of the C1, C2, and C3 district. To the east are properties zoned R175, currently occupied as single-family residences. South of this property are properties zoned C3, and also the Ignite planned unit development is south of this property. As you can see, it does span both sides of Merle Hay Road by looking at this overhead here. And let's see, to the west are properties that are occupied by townhouse and condominium residential uses. And the proposed uses, the proposed changes would be in compliance with our comprehensive plan. If you have any questions for me, I can answer those now.
Council, have any questions for Aaron?
Aaron, I do have a few questions. So you should, can you go back to that map, please?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 1 second.
That'll be snitty one. So the mark in red is the one you're proposing to convert to a different zone? Or?
Yeah, the red boundary is the boundary of this planned unit development. Again, it spans properties on either side of Merle Hay Road, generally south of Northwest 55th Avenue there. And it includes frontage on Merle Hay Road, but also the one of the child serve properties. And so actually that child serve property would be zoned to C1, which is really just an office type use.
So on the west side, isn't there a residence up there?
Not within the boundaries of, on the east side, there is.
Sorry,
and
on the east side. I'm sorry.
right, the east side is right here.
Yes.
It's the only residence remaining on that side of the street, south of Northwest 55th, scheduled at some point to come down and be redeveloped commercially. So rezoning that to a commercial class would.
Tell me more about that residence. Are you saying that residence, that person who's living right now in that building does not stay there, or she moved away, or it's
can stay there as long as she wishes to. Zoning is currently, it's not a residential zoning class. It's currently zoned commercial. She's considered lawful non-conforming. So the property she doesn't have to go anywhere. The property can stay. It just is a lawful non-conforming use.
I understand what you say, but bear with me on this. Isn't that residence been there for a longer time than I can remember that?
Yeah, I'm not sure how long she's occupied the property, but I believe it's a substantial amount of time.
And when was this converted to a commercial?
Yeah, this really doesn't change anything for her per se. If anything, like I said, the properties are currently zoned for C3 uses. So we're not changing her from a residential zoning class to a commercial zoning class. She's already considered lawful non-conforming. She's already zoned for C3 commercial uses. Just the PUD is poorly written and we need to clean it up a little bit and make it more easy to understand.
Okay, fair enough.
Aaron, I do have a question. So included in the package is this PUD of a car wash. But we are only voting tonight on the zoning change.
Sure, I think
This document that shows what this potential proposal is will come before us on its own. At
Yes,
some point.
I'm actually pinch hitting for Clayton tonight. So this was an item that he had taken to our planning commission previously, and it appeared on their agenda as both a site plan and a rezoning. And the planning commission considered both of those at the same time. At this point in time, it's coming to you only as a rezoning because you cannot approve a site plan unless the zoning, unless the use is in compliance with the zoning class. So what I'm saying is consideration of the site plan. It did go to the planning commission. They did recommend approval of the site plan, but it goes on hold until we resolve the zoning issue.
And then it will come back to
Then the
us
site
on
plan
its
will,
own.
yep, absolutely. The site plan will come back to you for consideration at a later date.
Thank you.
Yeah, that leads to some questions as well. It should not have been included as part of this package in this.
No, because like I said, technically the city council can't approve a site plan for a use that doesn't comply with the district. So that's why we have to resolve the zoning issue before you look at the site plan.
Councilman Evans?
So if I understand, so right now it's C3.
Yes.
And so are we being asked to consider changing it to C2 because of this car wash?
You know, it gets a little complicated. I want to say a year or so ago, the council actually approved some changes to the zoning ordinance that would allow car washes in the C2 district. And so typically the C3 district allows all uses of the C2 district. So typically we would say property zone C3, C3 allows uses of C2, C2 allows car wash. However, this is not a straight C3 zoning class. It's a PUD that references C3. And in there's some convoluted wording that kind of implies car washes are not allowed. So again, if you could follow all of that, I know that's part of the reason we're in here trying to clean this up because it is such a mess and hard to understand. C3 uses, those would be uses you'd find closer to the interstate. C2 uses, general commercial uses. This property is, appropriate for C2 uses.
Okay, so go back to the residential property. So if, something happens to the current resident and her family ends up with the home and they want to keep it forever, that's possible, correct?
Yeah, the city has no design or intention to force the resident out. I mean, there's always such a thing as like an eminent domain procedure, but that's not something we typically exercise. Here in Johnston, you can't do it. I believe there's laws that state you can't do it for an economic development reason. So yeah, there's no reason why we would force that resident off of the property. David might have a little more history on this resident. If David, is there anything that you want to add about the resident of this property?
No, I think you've hit on it. I mean, the current zoning is commercial. It would stay commercial, change from the PUD to the straight C2, but it doesn't change any non-conforming status that's already there today. So as long as
So this is a kind of a sticky one, and I'm trying to understand it. So at one point, this was a residential property. These were residential properties all along here. And so it was zoned residential.
Yes.
At some point,
I'll stop. I don't know that it was ever zoned residential in the city. I think we had zoning in the city, it's been in some form of commercial zoning. So the residential use would have predated incorporation.
okay, so for instance, this resident has lived there predating whenever we had residential or commercial zoning there. Is that safe to say?
It's been occupied residentially since
Okay.
prior to.
So
incorporation.
in our zoning, if we have a situation like this, where let's say it was residential at one time, the resident continues to live there or the same family owns the property, but yet everything around it gets zoned commercial, why wouldn't we still continue to treat that residence as it's being zoned residential?
Well, we are for this one resident that has chosen to stay there. We're not forcing or asking any changes of her property. She's allowed to leave it as is and it's occupied residentially. There's been no changes to the house, no changes to the landscaping on her property
But when we put a C2 or C3 up against a residential property, we have requirements for buffer zones.
right. And so technically that's a use. Buffering technically is applied between zoning districts. And so because she would have the same zoning district as the north adjacent property, there wouldn't be a buffer requirement. However, I think that site plan that was approved does, I mean, we take this into consideration. As you can see, there's a little bit of buffering there on the south end.
There's also been a fence added.
A fence was added as a condition of the planning commission approval. Is that right, David?
Yeah, and again, that's not on consideration tonight. That would come before the council
Right. So,
post zoning.
I mean, these are things that we look at when the adjacent property brings forward a site plan. And so we did in this instance, take a look at the buffering. The resident was at the meeting, or a representative of the resident was at the meeting and requested some additional buffering. And I think that's why they put the condition in there to install the fence. So, nobody's trying to force her out. She's allowed to stay there as long as she wishes. We review buffering when we approve a site plan.
So if we don't approve this, what happens?
If you don't approve this, then the car wash wouldn't become an allowed use of the district, and the car wash application would go away. And in the future, somebody else would want to develop the property, and we would probably be back in the same position where we would have a confusing PUD, and I would be back before you asking you to
And that's what I'm
make it
trying to
more
figure out.
clear and
What-
rectify
what-
it.
What could go in there?
C2 uses, you see C2 uses all up and down Merle Hay Road.
So Aaron, give us an example of what could go in there if it's.
When we look at the opposite side of the street, there's strip center here, there's some restaurant uses, strip center, retail, commercial uses, things of that nature.
And does this include the property on the corner of Winwood and Merle Hay? The old student or school.
No, this does not. This stops short of that. This looks like it goes right up to the boundary of this PUD goes right up to the Men's Garden Club property. The south side of the Men's Garden Club property.
Thank you.
So Aaron, so I'm looking at page 1 of the staff report where it says recommendation. And it says, so 1 and 2, because I'm just trying to understand what is C1 and what is C2. So it says 7,800 acres to the center line of adjoining right of way from PUD to C1. It would be C1 now. And then 8,359 acres to the center line of adjoining right of way from would be C2.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping around. I was trying to find a good exhibit, but you said under the recommendation.
I have scrolled through the 39 pages.
8.359 acres. I thought I heard you say 83, so I wanted to make sure we were clear on that.
8,359 acres.
Yeah.
No, is it 8.39? I'm sorry. I'm not as good with my acres as I used to be.
I just want to make sure there wasn't a typo in there.
7.8 acres.
Page 26 may help you. I don't want to confuse you from where you are, but.
I mean, I can try to just vary. I don't, that's actually,
So go.
this is not actually what you
And you would
want.
look
This-
at that and you'd think, oh, this must be the map.
This is a
But it
page.
isn't, Because
This is
if
a
you go back
page.
and look at the outline,
It
the
doesn't
red
shape-
outline,
it doesn't match the shape.
it doesn't match the shape. And so,
This is one
and
of the
I
reasons.
realize you're in kind of a difficult spot because this is, you're
It's,
kind of.
what makes it difficult is this PUD is written so poorly
Yeah,
and there's
but
not
what
good
it's not
exhibits that were with the
difficult-
first one.
What is not difficult would be to have, you go back to your original map, right?
Sure.
That has the red outline. You know, not that one.
Okay. And I was looking to see if he had made the change to this map and I believe he maybe
So the
has.
map that appears on, see, PZ 2306 aerial vicinity map. It's page 9 in the in our document. But even if you look at that, clearly though, to me, doesn't look like 8.3 acres on one side.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Tom. I think just if I were to try to simplify this the best way I can. Everything on the east and west sides of Merle Hay Road is to be zone C2. The child serve property on the west side of Merle Hay Road is to become C1. So the
Yeah,
child serve property.
but we're
is-
kind of guessing at this point, right?
And he's got a map here. It's just very, if you, let me get back to it. I think it's this here. You can, and I wish it was better highlighted, but you can see.
Can you zoom in a little bit more on that?
Try here. So the child serve uses behind the commercial uses would be zone C1 and everything fronting Merle Hay Road, zone C2.
Okay. That is
So
helpful.
if we were to extend this line here straight down, everything to the left of it would be C1 and everything to the right of it would be C2. If I were to extend this line straight down. There is a little bit of,
Yeah, that isn't.
yeah, it's an L shape. There's a little bit of child serve property here that is parking lot. So everything is child serve parking lot, child serve building, C1. Everything else on that map, C2.
Other questions for Aaron?
Mayor, I do. Aaron, those business owners and property owners on that west side of Merle Hay, how many of them requested that this PUD be eliminated and their zoning be changed?
I don't believe any of them requested it. The request really is solely based on the fact that we have a site plan that's being presented to to the council, or will be presented to the city council. So, and that's on this east, for property on the east side of Merle Hay Road. So the request would have come from that property owner to allow for the car wash use to be constructed. Really, it's not changing anything for the other users. They're currently occupied by C2 uses. And so this does take away the ability to do some C3 uses, but really we're trying to phase some of that C3 out on Merle Hay Road anyway. Those are higher intensity highway service commercial uses that probably aren't appropriate for these upper stretches of Merle Hay Road. We're trying to keep them limited down to the lower stretches of Merle Hay Road. They're currently being used according to uses of the C2 district. It doesn't really change anything for these folks.
For a little further context, this was a PUD that was identified during our zoning code update as needing to be rezoned because it's it's not legible and it's very difficult to determine the uses that are allowed in it. And so as part of the public engagement process, so we went through with the zoning code, and prior to the public open house we had in January, all of these property owners were notified that this was one that we would be considering a rezoning at some point in the future. I believe Clayton has talked to all the property owners within the area during that process, and I don't believe we've heard any opposition to the change.
So I gave you a very one-dimensional answer. The request came from one party, but all the parties it's been discussed with all the parties and they've been notified and have had an opportunity to express objection.
Thanks, Aaron. My next question has to do with that residential property that, and I'm going to use your terminology, or I will fail to be able to use the appropriate terminology.
but it is.
Lawful non-conforming? Is that
Thank
what you're
you.
looking for? Yeah.
Lawful non-conforming. While I know there's discussion of boundaries or buffers or things along those lines that may need to be constructed on behalf of the homeowner or excuse me, the property owner to the north, is it true that any improvements or buffers, landscaping that property owner were to make to buffer themselves and their residents would not be lawful?
Not sure.
In other words, can they make improvements to their property to make sure that they're not impacted?
They can
by-
absolutely landscape their property as they wish. They're not required to make any landscaping changes. When we allow development against an already developed parcel like this, we don't typically impose any buffering requirements on the existing landowner. All of the requirements get shifted to the property owner who's developing the property. But anything that this existing owner wishes to do to further buffer their property, they're free to do so.
What if that involved constructing a large wall attached to their facility?
To the residential property?
Yes.
Walls and fences are covered in our code of ordinances. Gosh, for a commercial district, I think they can go up to 8 feet. So it would be allowed.
So there isn't a percentage of improvement that they'd have to stay under?
No, it really, what that would apply to would be if they wanted to expand the residential use. And I wouldn't consider additional buffering to be an expansion of a residential use. If they wanted to make an addition on the home, that would not be allowed because it's a non-conforming use, and we can't allow expansion of a non-conforming use. And that's a current condition, and this wouldn't be changing that condition. This zoning change wouldn't be changing that.
I would like to follow up on a discussion you had with Councilman Evans. And it seems to conflict with the last time we talked about this property. And basically, you have stated if we do not go ahead and approve in 3 readings, I believe, this zoning change, that the car wash would not be allowed under the current zoning.
That's my understanding. The current zoning class doesn't allow car wash. That's why we're here trying to clean this up so that we can, in C2 district, again, there's some confusion there because it's hard to follow. The C2 district, it does allow car washes. You guys have made that change to your ordinance a year or so ago. But this is a PUD. And so it's not simply a PUD that references C2 and C3 uses. It actually specifically prohibits car wash in the text language. That's our interpretation of it. It's some weird language.
This is a slightly different spin than what we had before, but thank you for clearing that up. It answered my question.
To be fair, it is not clear in the PUD. I mean, I don't believe we can say it's allowed, but it's very ambiguous in the way the PUD is written. So it's not very, it doesn't just say you can't have a car wash, period. It's not that clear. So there could definitely be a legal debate over whether it would be or would not be allowed. So.
David. quick
So
question.
if this zoning proposed change didn't go through tonight, it doesn't mean the car wash would be stopped in its tracks. It means that there's some more discussion to happen.
I can comment on that, Aaron.
Please do.
So yeah, in working with the staff, our interpretation of the existing PUD ordinance is that the language prohibits convenience stores with car washes. And then there's a sentence that says, or other similar uses. So a convenience store with a car wash normally is a one-bay car wash. And what's being proposed is a one-bay car wash. And so our interpretation is under the existing PUD ordinance, if a convenience store with a one-bay car wash is prohibited, then likely a one-bay car wash as its own is prohibited as well because it is a similar use. That's our interpretation at this point. That's why staff is now recommending the rezoning to clean that up so that it's clear that it is a permitted use. If council doesn't approve the rezoning, the existing PUD would stay in place. The applicant could still disagree with our interpretation and say, no, I think a car wash as a standalone use is allowed. It's not specifically prohibited in the PUD. And they could appeal staff's decision on that to the Board of Adjustment. That's typically how that plays out if there's interpretation disagreements.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
Any other questions for Aaron?
I have a question for, maybe for David as much as Aaron, but kind of as part of the global sort of city staff interest in addressing PUDs. So is there kind of, is the objective to go through kind of PUD by PUD, and this is sort of the first one up, to try to move them from PUD status to the proper zoning?
That's the plan. I mean, we identified through the zoning code process 15 or 20 odd PUDs that are various ages and of various detail that could easily be converted to a standard zoning district. And so, we're not going to do all those rezonings all at one time, and we'll, go neighborhood by neighborhood or area by area and do notifications and do all those sorts of things and make sure we're not creating any nonconformities. That's not the intent. All of those that were identified during that process have previously been notified, and we're all invited to the open house back in January as part of that process. So we've already started the dialogue with all of those PUD areas where we might have some, desire or it would be beneficial to change those PUDs.
So it's kind of important to look at this agenda item tonight is not just through the lens of, what impact it could have on a residential property. It sounds like it won't really, whether this PUD passes or not, their status doesn't really change. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Or even the lens of, do you want to think this is an appropriate spot for a car wash or not? Although it's impacted, that's not really the direct reason this is in front of us tonight. This is really part of the zoning process, right? Of trying to kind of clean up some of these PUDs.
Yeah, the interest of the developer in this instance has driven the timing of this. You would have been considering a change like this at some point over the next 6 months, regardless of development interest, as staff work through the process of cleaning up some of these PUDs. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions for Aaron? Aaron, remind me again, all the other property owners have been notified. They participated in the open house. They had the opportunity to attend the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to raise any concerns they had there. Who was at the Planning and Zoning Commission?
In terms of public, the south adjacent property owner who owns the residential house, and they weren't there to object to the zoning or anything of that nature. They were there just in interest of what was being approved and to seek some additional buffering along the south edge of the property.
And the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended the additional, and we don't have the site plan in front of us tonight.
Not the entire site plan. Here's a one page of it. And generally we give you the landscape page to show you the contours and the greenery, give you the prettiest picture. And that's what you see there.
This is how they propose to address that concern, and we can certainly,
Minus the fence at the south end.
yeah, we could, when the site plan comes to the council, they can certainly look at that and make changes if that's the pleasure. Any other questions, council? This is a public hearing on this matter. Is there anyone who would like to address the council?
My name's Ronald Ward. I'm here representing, excuse me, my mother Ramona, who owns the property at 5455 Merle Hay Road. 63 years she's lived there. It's been a residential property in Johnston for 70 years. It's still a residential property. I don't know when it, excuse me, got changed to PUD. I believe it was 1997, but that's so far back, I don't even know what the deal was there. But bottom line is, this is a residential property. She should have the same protections as any other residential property in this city, especially for somebody that's been here. She's been Johnston. Class in 1947. You covered a lot of my questions, by the way, that I had. I appreciate that. But I think as you look at this. If this is my mother's back porch, you're the lot line, Mayor. That's all the farther away it is. It's either vacuums or a big ugly fence. So that's why I'm asking about the buffer. I did not ask about any buffer. I asked about a 50-foot buffer at the planning and zoning meeting back in February. So I would ask the council to treat a residential property like a residential property. I mean, it's just,
Do you have any specific requests?
oh, that's about as specific as I can be, is to specifically, yeah, zone her back to residential. Or make it a dual usage zonage. Something where she can have some protection.
Is there something additionally that you would see in the way? The site plan is not in front of us tonight.
This is a note, I was gonna read this, but literally you covered a lot of it, okay? So I didn't really feel the need to do that. But I felt you needed to hear from the property owner here. We were really never given clear vision on what this was gonna look like. When we met with Clayton months ago, it sounded like, oh, well, nothing's gonna change. Well, apparently nothing is, because she's been considered commercial all this time. But she's not, it's residential. It's not about stopping progress, it's just, I just want to protect her rights here.
And we want her to continue to live there as long as she wants to live there, and that it continue to be a residential property for as long as any family members want it to be.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Dustin Creech. I live at 6706 Peckham Street in Johnston. And although I didn't come here to speak on behalf of this item on the agenda tonight, I do feel that there is one thing to mention to y'all, because you were not there at the P&Z meeting. And I did listen to this gentleman present, okay, that night at P&Z. And, you know, one of the things is that what happened is, I believe that fellow asked, does our city need another car wash? And let me just say, the room erupted in applause, because we have a plenty, in case y'all haven't driven around the area lately. And I just wanted to share that with you. You know, I know that perhaps he also brought up the idea of, you know, having buffering installed. And I have seen, like, even city staff tonight, I think, point out that a little bit of buffering was installed. Oh, that's nice. That's a good start, I guess. You know, one of the things that has not been brought up in this fellow's case is the fact that that buffering, yes, it may shield the line of sight for that property owner, but guess what? That noise, the noise coming from that business running, what about vacuum cleaners? I imagine they might have those there. You know, can you imagine how much disruption that will cause that nice lady that lives there of, was it 63 years? I bet that she wouldn't appreciate that. Anyhow, I just wanted to mention that to y'all to take that into consideration. Thank you. Is
there anybody else in the audience that would like to address the council on this item? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing then at 8:20. We have an item in front of us. It is ordinance number 1095. Do we have a motion to approve first reading of ordinance 1095?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Motion fails for lack of a second. Do we have any other motion?
I'll move to table agenda item number 4B.
1095, ordinance number
Yes.
1095. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second to table the first reading of ordinance number 1095. Discussion?
I think this one is, it's kind of a challenging, obviously it's a challenging issue. We don't normally have, this much discussion and obviously a motion that doesn't have a second. And I'm not, I think that's perfectly understandable, but I think tabling it, and I think we tend to try to figure out some sort of solution on these things. And I think we have to do some work on that. I don't think we could just leave this hanging out there. This is part of the whole zoning process. And these issues are not just going to go away. You have property owners who, we certainly, Mrs. Ward has property rights. I think we have to respect that. But that doesn't mean that we don't consider anybody else's property rights. That's a balance. That's part of our job. So that's why I think tabling it and allowing a better understanding of what we're really looking at is appropriate here. So that's why I made the motion.
We're hearing from staff that we need to update the zoning in this area. And so we need to have more discussion about what that looks like. If it's not this, what is it? I think that makes sense.
I agree with you both. I think we need to explore the more compelling reason as to why this has to happen and how it has to happen now. I also would encourage staff and legal to consider if there are options for kind of sunset or legal precedent that could cause this zoning to take place once we don't have a non-conforming occupant within that property. Setting it forward for future use. So I will support tabling this at this point in time for further discussion.
Any other discussion?
I would like to add it, the uses under the current confusion. What is allowed and what's not. So it's nice and clear so that the next time we talk about this, we know that a fast food restaurant with a drive-through is allowed or not. Or maybe it's a donut shop, maybe it's an ice cream shop. Is that allowed or not? Or is it a car wash? Is it a service station? Is that allowed or not? Having that in front of us, knowing for sure, would be very helpful. So I support tabling as well.
Any other discussion?
I think the only question I would have is, I usually when we table these items, that means it has to come back at the next meeting. I'm not sure this item will be addressable. Can we delay it a little longer than one meeting?
I mean, it's not required they come back.
No, it's not.
Okay, I just want to clarify that. Okay.
So for clarification, you raised the question about once we table it, when does it come back? I think that the suggestion would be it's tabled until staff brings it back to us.
It was maybe a little bit of input from us about,
Oh,
it has
absolutely.
3 votes as opposed to just 1 vote or 0 votes at this point. That clearly has happened here,
Yeah,
which is
I think
unfortunate. I think we need to understand that.
Yeah, I think the staff understands they will not bring it back to us until we have directed them to do that.
Okay.
Any other discussion? If not, Sam, vote please.
Martin, Burkhart,
Yes.
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Martin.
Moving on to item 4C, conduct a public hearing and consider approval of the following items related to a rezoning located southeast of the intersection of Northwest Towner Drive and Northwest 121st Street, PZ case 23-02, resolution number 23-75, approving a development agreement with Northwest Urban Village LLC pursuant to chapter 414 of the Iowa Code. Action on this item must occur prior to closing of the public hearing. First reading of ordinance number 1096, amending the official zoning map for 33.577 acres from AR to CD and R1 60. And we'll open this public hearing at 8:25. David?
Good evening. You have before you tonight a rezoning request. Our sort of first one in this, our annexation area to the west of Highway 141. The subject site is shown on the exhibit here with
Northwest 121st along the left side of the map, and Northwest Towner Drive along the north side of the map. And Beaver Creek as well, right there along the north side of the map. This request is to rezone the property from AR, which was the automatic designation that was in, the property was zoned at when it was included in annexation, to R160 for the residential component. And then there is a small area, there's a strip of land along the south side of the development between the proposed development and the property owned by the city of Grimes for their water wells. That's proposed to be conservation district or CD, and that's just right at 3 acres. That would be conservation and left and maintained as open space. As the mayor alluded to, with the recommended motions, there is a proposed development agreement that's before you tonight that would provide further restriction to the R160 uses. I'll go through those restrictions as they're stated in the development agreement. The first being a density restriction that would limit the overall number of lots within the subject property within the rezoning area to not more than 65 buildable lots. Consistent with recommendations in our comp plan for transitional uses, there are additional setbacks located along Northwest 121st Street along the west side of the property to increase the setbacks on those parcels, as well as along the north side along Towner Drive. Some additional setbacks is there as well. I would note on that particular one, there is some language that would allow the council and the commission to consider alternatives to that or waiving that. As the council has discussed prior, at least in some committee meetings, what happens with Towner Drive and those, whether it gets closed and what part of it gets closed and if it gets relocated. There's some discussion that, there's some unsurety there of how that might impact this development. And we wanted to allow just a little bit of flexibility for the commission, the council in the future, if that's needed based on how that discussion plays out. In addition, there are requirements for landscape buffer along those same areas along Northwest 121st Street, as well as along Towner Drive. And finally, there are restrictions related to the number of driveway accesses along 121st. Essentially, they would all have to come from an internal street network and not have individual driveways out to Northwest 121st. This was reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and they did recommend approval. With that, I'll stop there and ask if there are questions of staff. I would note there is a concept plan here. Obviously, this is a rezoning to a standard zoning district, so you're not approving the concept plan, but it has been provided to give you a sense of the current vision that the developers have on the property. And there are representatives of the applicant here tonight that can address any questions you might have as well.
Also have any questions for David?
David, I have a question. I vaguely remember in a previous subcommittee meeting, some discussion about when we were talking about that Towner Drive would eventually close per county request. That there was some discussion about how much of this property owner would be able to encroach on what was that roadway. Does this accommodate for that at all?
I mean, this is encroaching on some of that right away, but we've not worked through those details at all yet. So that would require approval and action of both the county and the city to actually vacate that right away for that to happen. And so there's a lot of process there. And so this does envision basically the Towner as it exists today routing through the subdivision with a temporary access back out to the existing alignment on the east side of the proposed development. But there's a lot of engineering and a lot of work and approvals that would be needed for that. And so, well, that's the current concept, and that kind of alludes to the suggested language related to the buffering along or the setbacks along that Towner Drive. There's just a lot of unknowns there that we'll have to work through.
All right, thank you.
David, I'm trying to visualize where this actual location is. Can you have a map, better map? Okay.
Yeah, and this one probably isn't zoomed out far enough. So for context, Highway 141 is right here on the map. Beaver Creek Golf Course is on the east side of 141. This property is this area right up here in the northwest, or would be the southeast corner of Northwest 121st and Northwest Downer Drive.
All right, thanks.
I have some questions, David. At what point do you start in these development agreements, putting in requirements for trail building?
Not normally. We can. That typically would come with the preliminary plat, particularly with the changes we're making to the zoning code that would consider trails part of our public infrastructure.
Okay. But the developer might want to know, from my point of view, we have a beautiful piece of Beaver Creek along here. We have been talking and talking about making trail connections from Johnston up to the northwest and specifically some of these areas. I don't know that it's going to go this way or it's going to go toward Jester Park, but maybe they should, you know, and that's a reason why we are trying to get a master plan done for our trails. And it's crucial as these site plans, and it's not a site plan, but these proposals come before us. You know, the knowledge that we're going to want to have trails built through here too should be given to the developer, I would think. The other question I have specifically about this, it talks about if you zoom in, they call that, there's a streamway. I can't read the note that's right there.
There's a stream buffer requirement that they'd have along.
And so part of this is going through their backyards. So when a stream buffer requirement just means there's no building in it, or are we actually?
There's the code, it depends on, there's distance requirements, and then depending on the type of stream, there's different requirements. But yeah, that wouldn't allow any construction of any buildings or
sheds.
anything, no sheds, none of
Fencing.
that. I don't believe so.
Do we require, you know, but they can have lawn right up to there. It's,
Now you're testing my memory of the,
oh,
of the
okay.
code.
Well,
But
I guess what I'm trying to get to is this concern that we are letting nitrates come off of lawns. You know, there's 100 feet to Beaver Creek, which feeds into all our water supplies along with the raccoon. So, you know, these are things that we should be thinking about as we look at these new developments. I know I'm putting a lot on you, and I appreciate all the things that you do for us. But it is something that I'm going to be looking at as we work on specifically this new section of our city. Thank you.
So this is a rezoning, right, David? So we would have two more looks at this if it's approved tonight.
Yes.
I would really ask that we get a little bit better mapping of this. For instance, and I think to Councilperson Martin's question, it would be helpful to have, so kind of this conceptual sales exhibit attachment, which is, it's not part of the staff report, I don't think, because I can't find it, but that document you have right there, it'd be really helpful if you could like Google map it, right? So we could see for like a aerial shot of it and see where it is in relation to the creek and
the road.
Right, exactly. And especially because I think, you know, Councilperson Martin makes a really good point about understanding kind of where this is in relation to the creek. And it's just hard to visualize that. And also, I think the Councilperson Reddy's question, I up until the previous exhibit, I thought this might be the worst mapping I've ever seen for something that came to a council meeting, but the last two in a row are really competing for a low finish. So I would encourage staff to up their mapping game because it's really poor in these two items. Just want to note that. So, but obviously we get a couple more shots at this one if it's approved tonight. And so I think we need to get better at than what we're seeing here on this one. So, I do have a question about the use of R160, and maybe the developer's representative can answer that a little bit. Kind of what from a city standpoint, what are the kind of the significant differences between R160 and R175 or R1?
60 would just provide a reduced front yard setback and side yard setbacks to allow greater flexibility.
So you can build the house closer to.
Closer to the street, a little bit closer together. And you know, when you're looking at things and why I think from staff's perspective, it makes sense when you're asking for greater setbacks on perimeters, when you know, on the south side of this, there's some wetlands and things that they're trying not to impact. It makes sense that you cluster, you know, what's not talked about here, but there's 20-ish acres to the east of this that's essentially completely undeveloped or undevelopable because of peat. And so in a sense, it makes sense that you would cluster the development in the areas where you can. And so this just gives them greater flexibility from a lot layout perspective and an ability to protect other natural resources and get a little bit more flexibility there. I mean, at the 65 units or lots that are limited in the development agreement over the 30-ish acres that are here. I mean, it's only an average lot size of 20,000 square feet. So you're at a half acre average lot size. It's not a,
so
it's not a dense development as it's proposed or as it would be limited to in the development agreement.
So remind me again, so how many lots again?
This concept has 58 or 59. The development agreement will allow some flexibility because we have all that unknown along Towner Drive to go up to 65. And I did the math earlier. They're just right at 30.4 acres. It was just over 20,000 square feet on average.
So on average, you're talking about 2 lots per acre, when you have all the others carve outs and
Yes.
stuff. So yeah, I don't have a problem with the 60-foot. It's a little unique. We don't do that a lot, but that doesn't mean it's bad, right? I mean, I think having homes a little bit closer to the front, there might be certainly some benefit to doing that, get a little bit more neighborhood kind of feel anyway. So I think that there's some value to that, so.
Any other questions for David? If not, is there anyone else? This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the council?
Good evening. My name is Luke Slings. I live at 12041 Northwest Towner Drive. That's the only residence immediately north of this development. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. This proposed development agreement that's before you tonight contains language requiring additional setbacks, as David described, and landscape buffers near the existing residences on both 121st Street and Northwest Towner Drive. And I believe these requirements were put in place by city staff or recommended by city staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission because they are consistent with the vision and the goals that are described in the city's Thrive 2040 comprehensive plan. Although these setbacks are smaller and the zoning density is greater, excuse me, than I would have wanted, I stood here at the P&Z Commission public hearing in February and spoke in support of the zoning change because I believed that the appropriate transitions would be put in place as a result of the language in the proposed development agreement. I thought, and I still think, that the owners of this property should have the opportunity to develop at this high density if that's what they want to do, but only if the appropriate transitions are created between the different land use densities. I'll spare you all the math, and we've kind of gone through it a little bit here, but to put it in perspective, the proposed layout represents a 10-fold increase in density from one side of the road to the other. My neighbors and I properties were all on 5 acres. So now that we've seen this most recent conceptual lot layout, we know that the language in the proposed development agreement was a bit too permissive. The agreement contains a provision, as David described, allowing the setback and buffer requirements along Northwest Towner Drive specifically to be waived if the road is relocated as part of the development process. As you can see on the conceptual layout, and specifically it's the northernmost lot on the north side of the relocated Towner Drive, the developer is showing its intention to take full advantage of this loophole, not only sidestepping the setback and landscape buffer requirements near our property, but effectively moving the buildable areas of the adjacent lots even closer to our property by eliminating the road right-of-way. It's my position that the setback and buffer requirements are necessary and appropriate, whether or not the road remains in its current location. Now, I intend to work with the city staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission on this, as the subdivision plat is developed in the weeks to come. But you can help us tonight by sending a clear message that the principles of the city's comprehensive plan will be upheld in Johnston as it expands into previously rural areas. You can do this tonight by simply amending the proposed development agreement by making the setback and landscape buffer requirements along Towner Drive permanent. With this leadership from the council, I'm confident that all parties will be able to come to an agreeable solution. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kendra Slings, and I also live at 12041 Northwest Towner Drive. I wish there was an aerial photo of our property because this is drastically going to change our neighborhood. And I love what we have now. So do I like that this development is happening? No, not really. I could stand here all night and tell you how much I wish it wasn't happening, but I know you've all heard these kinds of things before, and I may not like it, but I accept that it is happening. It's a reality. So I guess I just want to reiterate what Luke said. We really just strongly would like to have these setback requirements. I wish there was an aerial photo. You would see that the lot, I don't even know if you can see the lot numbers, but it's close to our house compared to what, our existing neighborhood is. So that's my one request. I think it's a very modest request because it only affects a very small part of this new development. And I think in the end, it's a win-win situation. It will feel for the new homeowner like they're not in our front yard and will not feel like they're in their backyard. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there others in the audience?
Ken Wiley, and I live at 9311 Northwest 121st Street. And I agree with the Slings on many of these issues. One of the things that we worked on with Polk County, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, we did planning, and I was on the planning commission for long-range planning for rural Polk County. And understand this is Johnston, but it's still rural Polk County. And the agreement was made at that time, and I didn't bring the book, it's this thick, which I could supply if you'd like to look at it. But basically what the plan was that areas adjacent to existing housing would be similar to what exists, so that we all live on acreages, and we would assume that there would be larger lots near us as a buffer between us and what looks like, a subdivision in the city. And I think it would be very helpful if we could see this in perspective with the existing buildings around and existing driveways, because at the last meeting, there was some discussion that that street that comes out onto 121st Street pretty much came right out into the front of.
There's an aerial here.
Okay. Well, but that doesn't show, yeah, that doesn't show the street. So, we have neighbors that live along 121st Street that the concern was expressed at the last meeting that that street would line up with their driveway or straight at the front of their house. So you'd have traffic coming in and out. And, that we were given the impression that there were some changes that would be made possibly to curve that road so that it doesn't line up.
Just hang on, I'll get this up on the screen.
Okay. Well, it'd be helpful to see it on the screen. I mean, we do have a couple neighbors that are here as well, whose properties would be pretty much lined up with that street coming out, and they may want to speak as well, but That's there.
Yeah,
Yeah, you don't need me in there.
Very crisp. High def.
Okay, so what we were talking about at that last meeting was, I'll use my pointer here, is the proximity of this street coming out of this subdivision with the driveway here. And, you know, that was of concern for someone that can't be here tonight, unfortunately. And we talked with the designer and he made some suggestions that he could curve this road over a little bit so that it wouldn't line up.
They might have fixed that already, Ken.
They might have fixed that, okay. Okay, but on the exhibit, I couldn't see where those driveways were. So it would be helpful to see the whole thing, you know, kind of all at once, so. I mean, if it were up to me, I would just postpone this until we have better information. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah.
My name's Melissa Siegfried. I live at 9090 Northwest 121st Street, and I live directly across from where this outlet of maybe 65 homes is going to come. So to your point about the trail, we had a beautiful trail on Northwest Towner Drive. During construction, I have no idea how all of this will happen, but it is directly across from our driveway, as is at the moment. I would ask, I would agree, the fact that we're not shown on the map where we actually live in relation to how this is happening seems very much an oversight to me. So this is very unclear as to how any of us are impacted. So I would ask that we would potentially postpone this as well, so we could actually see how this interacts with the way our properties lie today.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council?
Hello, I'm Denny Drake. I live at 9004 Northwest 121st Street. And the concern I raised, some of which was addressed, that I raised at the P&Z meeting, which is addressed by tonight in terms of the number of driveways that can go on to Northwest 121st Street, and that's been restricted now to streets in the development. We're farmers, and currently we go north on a West 121st Street across 141 to get to our farming territory north. Well, a ripple effect of the state's closing of that intersection is that now for us to go north, we have to go south out of our driveway on Northwest 121st Street and find a way to then go north again. And so the engineering of the streets, the width of the streets, from our perspective, is going to need to accommodate semi trucks, large farm equipment, or we're going to have to go back into Grimes to get north. And that's going to be more dangerous and more time expensive, et cetera, et cetera. So when they look at how Northwest 120 northbound traffic on Northwest 121st Street that is now going to be cut off at 141 gets somehow back to a route that goes north, the concern or the request is consider the fact that there will be semi-traffic and large farm equipment on those roads going north, however the street layout is. And to the extent that those streets are narrower, the turning radius is shorter, it's going to be more dangerous. Safety is going to be affected. So that's the request. Mapping and being able to see and associate the proposed development to the actual geography, which is done fairly well by the combination of, you know, the technology we've got is good, but next time, a better look, visual look at how it all fits together would be good. So those are my comments. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council?
My name's Philip Leaguer. I'm with VDW. We're the design firm working on this. Honorable Mayor, members of the council, happy to be in front of you. Happy to be heard, happy to be considered. This has gone through a considerable process to get to this point, so 2 years for me. Many different iterations, taking into consideration many forces, including meeting with all the neighbors here. We've had meetings on our own accord to meet with them and try to understand their concerns within the context of the development of this area is inevitable. It's part of some other moving parts, as you know, and this will be an area that is going to grow, and that's part of why Johnston annexed it as well. So from looking at the comprehensive plan, meeting with city staff who've been remarkable, everybody, David, Clayton, all of them we've worked with have been remarkable. To the neighbors, we've been responsive to as much as we can to them. You know, if we did this as a 1R60, we'd have about 118 houses in here. We restricted it to 65 based on their comments. Also, the entry and egress drives, we moved, displaced them to make traffic patterns, headlights, etc., better for the neighbors. So there has been some work that has gone forward in making this be the best it can. It's never fun when, as designers, we go in and have to talk to neighbors about increased density in areas where they had none. That's always the most difficult, as you know. But we've tried our best to work and mediate between the developer, the finance team, the city, the neighbors, and come to something that I think will be as the best fit we could come up. This is a luxury development. These homes, these lots are going to be all 200 plus. So it's not, you know, it's not like we're putting in houses that are not consistent and equal to houses in the area. We have done density studies of maps beyond what the neighbors asked for, but you know, this was a P&Z hearing. So not all that maybe has been presented. Some of it's been presented to staff, but even the actual layout of the plat, you know, is something that isn't typically done for just a planning or just for a zoning change. Rhonda, you mentioned site trails. We're working with, that's something I personally am very excited about. The developers are excited about. We want this to tie into a network of trails that'll extend significantly beyond the property boundary. And the development team has control of a lot more acres. So this is just one part of a comprehensive development effort, and how all the park areas in relation and open spaces in relation to the residential areas will be developed is something we're very much taking into consideration. We're looking at this as what will become an identity, very important master plan for the whole development, the whole 160 plus acres. So this is the first part of it. We've had great input with the neighbors, all of them. They all obviously, you know, again, any changes are difficult, but they understand that there's, you know, proposal for an interchange here. A lot of other things are going to happen here. That's going to drive economic growth. And what we can do is try to manage it. And that's been our focus with the neighbors, is how do we make this something so it becomes an asset to them, both in terms of property value and lifestyle choices. So everyone hates it, again, when you have a lot of neighbors, but if we can make it so there are some services that also benefit that neighborhood, sometimes it can be okay. The buffers, the boundaries, we've worked with them on that. We've worked with Luke Slings. There is some exemptions from the standard that are in there, and that's what we have by his property, because we do want to make his property shielded from this development, both for the purpose of those individual new lot owners as well as the adjacent owners in the community. So we have our firm and working with the development team, the financial team, we've tried to do the best we can mediating these different factors. And I think what we have in front of you is very researched, and we'd be happy to provide more of that with the next meetings. But I think what we have here and have started is an exceptional plan, takes into consideration a lot of development. And again, it's part of an overall master plan, which is typically not done for a zoning request. So with that, I'll open it for questions from the council for me on any of the specifics.
The council have any questions?
Are you able to address the concerns that Mr. Slings brought up about the setbacks? And he was pretty specific about the issues he raised. And so it sounds like you believe that the development agreement isn't consistent with your expectations. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Well, let me just let him speak. That'd be great.
So it's pretty evident from looking at the lot layout, and I've overlaid it on an aerial photo myself so that I can examine exactly what's going on, that the developer in this case has made no effort to apply the additional setback requirements that are in the development agreement for Northwest Towner Drive. Specifically,
So I'm looking at the development agreement right now. So it says Northwest Towner Drive, corner side yard setback 35 feet.
it's the rear yard setback.
And then the rear yard of 50 feet.
Correct.
And that, so your belief is that even though it's called out for here specifically.
Right.
And which obviously that's for your case, having it in a development agreement, that's an enforceable agreement.
Right.
So at the end of the day, that's more sort of protection than that's pretty strong protection. Because in essence, if he violates that, then that's an enforceable agreement that he's signed, right? So
With the exception that council has the ability to waive those requirements if the road is relocated. And in their proposal, the road is relocated. And so what they're doing is they're taking advantage of that loophole to actually shift the buildable area of that lot number 58 or 59 as far north as possible. And so essentially they're only 35 feet because that's the rear yard setback that is default in R160. They're only 35 feet from the former center line of the road, which is actually 20 feet now closer. And that goes to the discussion about what are we doing with Towner Drive? Well, the conceptual layout is clear. They're bulldozing it and they're putting everyone's backyard right to the center line. Okay, and I know this because I've looked at it over an aerial photo. So yeah, my concerns are that they're ignoring the language in the development agreement and banking on the idea that this thing will have enough momentum that council won't waive the additional requirements or will waive the additional requirements because the roadway is being relocated. And again, my position is that it doesn't matter if the roadway is relocated. I think that our property should be accommodated the same setbacks as our neighbors are accommodated.
Okay.
Whether the road stays or not.
that's
a lot of words.
No,
so
that's helpful. I mean, it might be helpful to get sort of staff's perspective on it's pretty clear the 50 feet is pretty clear, but what you're saying is there's additional language in the development agreement that if the road is relocated, there establishes some sort of waiver process, and we'll get staff to get some feedback on that too. So.
Thanks.
I can address that. We are working with, is there a way to put the actual site plan back up that actually showed the layout?
If you take this mouse, there's.
Okay,
attachments,
okay.
I'm not sure which attachment you.
I'm not certain what you have here for, there, that one there. You can see in the north corner there where we rerouted the road so it'd be less nuisance to Mr. Sling. Right now, he's got a major road that goes right there. I mean, that major road is more of an encumbrance than someone's backyard that's 35 feet back. So I think that he's going to have a lot less noise and obstruction without the road being there than than a major road, a county road. Now, he might differ in that, but what we've tried to do is we're creating a private lane for him, which was originally part of the road. His entry was just gonna be part of the lane. We changed the way that was designed, and we're creating some green buffer there. So by him saying we haven't taken any consideration at all for his needs is absolutely false, and he knows it. We have taken consideration. Now, you always want more, and I understand that. So, but when you really look at this plan, most of those properties are not adjacent to his property. There might be one or two that the first properties on the north there, the first lot or two might be something that is closer, but you have to remember, this is still further away than the road that exists today, and that's a major county road. So we have tried to be considerate of that. And if we want to build more language into that first lot, that one that's adjacent to him, where he would be directly to the north, that's something that we could definitely look at as part of the comments for further readings. But we're trying to work with what's been established to date, which we think is a good plan. And again, most of these lots are not adjacent to Mr. Sling's property.
Well, and again, the hard part is without an aerial showing exactly where Mr. Sling's.
Can you
property-
see this drawing here? Can we get this back up on the screen? This overhead, because it's on here.
Okay, yeah, that would be
I'd
helpful.
like to show it to you. That can-
She's working. It's-
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Zoom that in even further. We do have his house located on here, so you can see it. This unfortunately, yeah, that's actually starting to help. This is before we rerouted the
You're
road.
gonna
'Cause-
need to zoom in a lot more than that, though.
Yeah, can you zoom in a little more even? Start to see his property right up here. That's pretty good, actually. This road originally was this configuration. Now, when you look at it, it's much more of an S curve that comes per the new plat map.
Are you talking about the internal roads to the neighborhood?
Yeah, the internal roads, because I'm actually, this right here is Luke's house. Okay, that's Luke's house, right where my fingertip is. So all of these lots are not behind his house. I mean, right now, this got moved down, this road's moved down, so the first lot is right here. So I would even, I don't have any issue with saying, hey, let's try to do things to make that first lot be a little more screening for Mr. Sling and his family. I don't have any issue with that. But to think that lots down here, when he's had a road there, now there's a house there with a 35-foot setback from the center of that road is a greater encumbrance, I don't think is being very genuine. That will be less noise and less encumbrance than a road. Because that Towner Drive, our hope is, working with the county and the city, that Towner Drive will be displaced and moved through the property. And that's why you actually see a connection from the cul-de-sac to the existing Towner Drive until the new Towner Drive gets built. So that's still a temporary solution, but it's going to benefit this whole area over time because it's going to really reduce the traffic that Mr. Sling has to endure in his location. So we are trying to be, I appreciate your concern very much, but we are trying to be responsive to it. And I think that the fact that the road would be moved, I'm shocked that he's not seeing that as a great consideration because most people, when you take a road out of their backyard, they're pretty darn happy about it. So that's all I have on that. So.
Any other questions?
So I guess I just want to clarify.
Okay.
If we make the language in the development agreement permanent the additional restrictions relating to Northwest Towner Drive. This does in fact only impact the one lot that is closest to our house, the lot that Mr. Vlieger has agreed to accommodate us on. So I think there's been a lot of talking in circles here and some conflation of things, but really we're requesting this one lot be mitigated, and it would be mitigated simply by the developer observing the requirements that are already set forth in the development agreement. That's in its simplest form, that's what we're asking for. Now, as far as all the other stuff, the road relocation, the longer driveway, this is all part of a solution that I'm certainly open to. And I've communicated that to Mr. Vlieger on one occasion, that we're open to solutions, definitely. The details of that, we haven't worked it out. We will, I'm confident we will. It involves, I'll have more snow to push, I'll have more lawn to mow. That's all okay in the name of making this development work and doing it right. I'm open to that. I want to move forward with that. But just to be clear, when I'm asking for the development agreement to be modified so that the requirements along Northwest Towner Drive are made permanent, I'm really just asking for an impact on that one lot where by the sequence of events of closing the road and eliminating the additional setbacks, we end up with a home, the back of a house right in our front yard. Thanks.
Mayor, can I ask a couple of questions to
Sure.
city staff?
Sure.
Just for clarification's sake, and David, thanks for approaching. My question, I guess, is multifold, but the first one is, we're only addressing zoning tonight.
Absolutely.
We're only addressing zoning.
You beat me to what I was preparing to address. You are addressing zoning.
Okay.
The development agreement does put in some limitations on expectations that you have as the council, we have as staff of implementing that zoning, some additional restrictions that go above and beyond the traditional restrictions and the R160 zoning in this case.
And those are the ones that are spelled out within the
Correct.
memo
The
here.
ones I went through, the 4 or 5 that I went through at the beginning and that are clear, that are spelled out in the development agreement that's attached to the staff report. And they're the density, number of units, setback along Towner and 121st, buffer along Towner and 121st, and driveways on 121st.
And just so I'm clear then, technically speaking, we have 3 reads of this. And then at some point, we will see a preliminary plat if this zoning were to take place.
Correct.
And is it safe to say that anytime between now and preliminary plat, the wording in the development agreement could actually continually be modified, including even restricting or excuse me, eliminating the wiggle room, so to speak, of a road?
Yeah, so the development agreement has to be adopted before you close the public hearing on a rezoning. So it's a condition you're adding to your approval of a zoning change.
Okay.
So, and Christine can elaborate on that, but that has to occur before you close the public hearing. And so no, that language can't change between your approval and preliminary plat. What happens then when the preliminary plat comes in is we pull out that development agreement and review the things that are in the development agreement and make sure that they're reflected on the plat. And so there is some language has been discussed that allows some flexibility along Towner Drive because there are unknowns, but that flexibility is solely at the direct discretion of the council. So it doesn't say the developer can waive it, staff can waive it, the council has to offer that waiver. So you have to approve that, and that would be done as part of a preliminary plat. There's just, as much as we want to have everything locked down as part of a rezoning, this is a concept plan. We haven't reviewed engineering, we haven't reviewed utilities and grading, and I mentioned if we're going to vacate Towner Drive, that's going to require approval of the county. It's going to require the approval of the city. There's a lot of layers. There's a lot of things that could change. Regardless of how much work that's went into this, things can still change. And so sometimes we need a little bit of flexibility, and that's why it's been built in. But I'm fully confident that, we'll be able to get there. It's just there's enough unknowns that it was staff's opinion that we should have a little bit of flexibility in that particular area.
I respect the flexibility that you've built in there. I'm going to be very candid. The presumption that all of a sudden this road will be vacated and then all of a sudden you get to plot and plan that is very frustrating to me. And so I can support where we're going with this. I'm very thankful that Mr. Slings had even expressed, I think we'll be able to find a solution. I love that type of optimism amongst neighbors and developers. But the presumption that all of a sudden you get to develop this a different way without truly taking into account city council opinion is incredibly frustrating. So please note that.
David, I have a question. So you said the development agreement needs to be approved before the closing of this public hearing. So we have one vote to make here
On the development.
on
agreement.
the development agreement. And the development agreement is setting all these setbacks along with the number of lots. And if I feel uncomfortable with the setbacks being described without having a clear idea of 121, where its alignment is, where is the neighbor's drives across the other side. So this is going to be difficult for me.
So the where the alignment is not set by the development agreement. What the development agreement does is in relation to driveways, it basically says you can't have individual driveways along 121st. It all has to be to the street network.
Okay, so that could be, okay, you've answered that question, but there's other questions in terms of the entire road right of way of 121 and how that and where these 10-foot setbacks are for the backs of the building lots. I'm having a hard time trying to figure out what it's going to look like. And you're saying to me, we're voting on this today.
Yeah, so the way that those, I guess I probably had the right exhibit up. The lots that are adjacent to 121st would have a normal setback, either a corner side or a backyard setback. What the development agreement says is in lieu of that, it needs to be, I'll pull that up so I get it right. In lieu of the traditional minimum 35 feet that's allowed in the R160, the corner side yard, which would be the second front yard on a corner lot, has to be 35 feet, and then a front or a rear yard setback would have to be 50 feet. So it's those have all been increased. So that would just be something we would review as part of a preliminary plat. Instead of showing a 35-foot setback, we'd show a 50-foot setback. That's how that would get applied. They've shown it on the exhibit today, but if those lots somehow change configuration in some way, shape, or manner, we'd apply those greater setbacks that are spelled out in the development agreement.
So David, can you outline, and I think, so as we look at setback restrictions that you just walked through, it has this language about north 100 feet to the south half of the northeast quarter of section, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not clear to me where the 35, the 50, and the 50 for the corner side, the front yard and the rear, which lots that applies to.
Yeah, so in this configuration, this top lot would be a side corner. So it would have two front yards. And so that's shown at 35 feet. All of these would be backyards. They're shown at 50 feet. These two, again, are corner lots down here on the south street. And those are shown at 35 feet because they are that side corner.
So Mr. Slings, but you don't, where do you live?
His fall under the second provision under B. It's not highlighting, but at the bottom of the second page, where it references Towner Drive.
So those restrictions, which lots do those apply to on the drawing?
Where they're adjacent, it would be, and again, we don't have the other lots shown on here, but it would be through at least the first or second lot where it's adjacent to an existing residential. Yeah, first two lots.
So those have a rear yard setback of 50 feet.
Unless council
would
write a waiver. Yeah.
I want to go back to where I was along 121st Street. you've described this as a high-end development. A lot of high-end developments like this that are adjacent to a country road like that would have buffers, would have extensive landscaping. When would that come in terms of either being required or being shown to us?
Part of the preliminary plat. So there's an
Is there any
there's an added
exemption?
there's an added requirement in the development agreement that it has to be at least a 10-foot buffer landscaping within those setbacks that we just talked about. And that landscaping has to be shown as part of the preliminary plat.
But it doesn't require any kind of berm, anything like that. And a 10-foot buffer is one tree every, not much. I guess, and I don't mean to have it designed here, and we've been here a long time. I just am trying to make sure that the setbacks that are being proposed here are going to fulfill the needs of this, you know, the neighbors and the people using the road and creating this beautiful, beautiful subdivision, that there's going to be landscaping, there's going to be room for a trail, there's going to be room for, I'd hopefully not 121. Why would it expand since it's going to be cut off to the north? But you never know. Maybe it's going to be curb and gutter at some time. I'm just trying to get this in my head. So those are the kind of questions that I know are coming later, but we're voting on the setbacks now.
And I think that's part of the challenge of, you have the zoning, right, which is kind of vague, but then you have the overlay of the development agreement, which applies very specific restrictions to as part of a kind of a vague process. And because the development agreement is only voted on the one time, as opposed to the 3 readings, this is your one opportunity to sort of weigh in on a development agreement. Now, I will say that the wording that does say that, and I appreciate this wording very much, that at the end, even if the developer says, I don't want, this road has been, I'm trying to look for the specific language. It says lesser restriction if the northwest, along Northwest 209, should the alignment be modified to shift the roadway to the south, that even if that would happen, the developer doesn't have 100% control. They still have to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Planning and Zoning Commission has to waive it to has to recommend waiver to us, and we would have to accept that. And I think given the lengthy discussion that and the focus we've given to this tonight, the likelihood that that's going to happen is probably not that great, but you never know. So anyway, so I do appreciate it from the staff doing, I think, a really good job of protecting and ensuring that the city has a say in that process. I think that's really important. And I appreciate the developer being willing to do that as well. And I think for the neighbors that, hopefully you understand the amount of time and focus we've given to this tonight gives us an opportunity to, there's certainly a big circle around it. So with that said, and I think that, and then the overall structure of the detail of it, to me, I think it would be helpful if the development agreement is going to have very specific provisions like this one does, to have the staff report, maybe call those out in a little bit greater mapping detail and direction, because it is.
Or maybe some sort of concept sketches about how our intention is that you will have landscaping along here, that we've created a setback that's far enough that there's enough width that we're going to give you the generous landscape that you're expecting. I agree with Councilman Cope. I think that the staff has done a good job. It is the first time we've seen this. I'm comfortable with what our staff has always presented us. They've always protected the city of Johnston. So I appreciate that it's been a long night, but I feel this conversation was very helpful.
Any other questions?
I'll just reiterate again, with that exemption that's in that staff report, Clayton and David worked very much with Mr. Sling and some of the other neighbors and with us, and we tried to build those in it. So there are those exemptions based on what happens with Towner Drive. If Towner Drive is essentially displaced and moved to the south, that has some, that of course means something. So, but if it doesn't, then that means something too. So that, there was a little bit of comment about just assuming that Towner Drive is going to move. We don't know that for sure, but we know there's a lot of pressure on a lot of people that are wanting us to say, we don't want that road anymore. So we're trying to make the neighborhood better without that road, and how we can even be the short-term solution by creating the route through this road with our new road to the north with a separate drive that even connects to it. So the developer is trying to be considerate of that. And the long term is those neighbors will have much nicer backyards if they're not facing Towner Road. And the same thing with Mr. Sling. All of them will benefit if Towner Drive is not there. In terms of privacy, value of their property, all of them will benefit there. Now, some will think that it's inconvenient to go through the development for the short term until a new Towner Drive would be constructed. But we're trying to be cognizant of all those features. And there is going to be a sidewalk and a landscape buffer all along 121. So that has been thought about. So and we're also looking at, we've got a path and a trail system that we're working with the county, just not something we can present yet, but we're very much considering all those things as part of the overall master plan. This is just the first northwest corner, and we're just trying to get a zoning request through. And again, the staff has been very good at trying to protect the interests of the neighbors. Any other questions for me? Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is still a public hearing on this item. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to address the council? Seeing none? Oh, that's right.
Resolution 2375.
2375. We have before us resolution number 2375. Do we have a motion?
I'll move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion.
I guess to reiterate, I think we've had a really good discussion about the finer points of this development agreement, which I'm really glad we did, because we've really dug in and I think have a better understanding of what they are. And I think you've raised some important issues that will certainly follow as this process moves forward. So.
Yeah, I would agree with what Councilman Copa said, and we have now highlighted the interest we're going to show in this development, and we will follow through to make sure it's the quality development that the neighbors are expecting.
And I also think, this is this change, and I think Mr. Drake put it well. I mean, this is a significant, your area. One of my son's best friends lives out in that neighborhood. And so I drive out there all the time, and this is gonna be a big change, right? And for folks who farm out there, how you're gonna, not just what's happening with the development that's happening, but also the changes to roads that can access 141, a lot of change that, you certainly, part of the reason you moved out there was to kind of get away from that. And that's going to change significantly. So appreciate an approach that you're taking that sort of recognizes that this is not unique. So.
We have a motion and a second. Vote, please.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Motion passed. We will now close the public hearing at 9:25. We also have before us the first reading of ordinance number 1096. Do we have a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Seeing none. Sam, vote please.
Cope,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Burkhart.
Yes.
Motion passed. Thank you for coming this evening, and thank you for your input. We really do appreciate it. Final public hearing this evening is to conduct a public hearing and consider the following items related to the proposed rezoning of approximately 5.87 acres located south of Northwest 70th Avenue and west of Peckham Street. Resolution number 2377, approving a development agreement with Wesley Development Services, limiting uses of lots 3 through 12, Brio of Johnston, Plat 2, to group care facility, nursing and convalescent home, assisted living facility, or housing for older persons as defined by section 807.B2, 42 USC 3607 of the Fair Housing Act, and limiting lots 1 and 2, Brio of Johnston, Plat 2, single-family detached dwellings. Consider first reading of ordinance number 1094, approving an official zoning map amendment for approximately 5.87 acres located south of Northwest 70th Avenue and west of Peckham Drive from R1 75 single-family residential district to R2 1 and 2 family residential district. And we'll open this public hearing at 9:26.
And I've got so many attachments on there. I don't know where I've placed my vicinity map, but the property is actually at the southwest corner of the intersection of Northwest 70th Avenue and Peckham Street. It would be the properties surrounding Brio Circle here and this little bit of property north and south of Northwest 69th Avenue. Wesley Development Services owns 5.87 acres on the west side of Peckham Street, adjacent to the Brio of Johnston Senior Living Community. And when the senior living community was platted approximately 5 years ago, the lots on the west side of the street were platted at the same time by Wesley, with intention to develop 12 single-story detached homes that would be incorporated into the Brio Continuum of Care living model. Due to market demand, Wesley now seeks to develop the by-attached housing units in lieu of single-family detached. In the concept appears here on the overhead. And this concept depicts 19 units over that same 5.87 acres. And they have requested a zoning change to accommodate this request to R2 zoning to facilitate that this concept. The difference will result in 19 total units after a zoning change in lieu of 12 housing units that are allowed under today's zoning. The density before or to what is allowed today is 2.04 units per acre, and the density that would be allowed after with this proposal is 3.08 units per acre. The Planning Commission did consider this request at their February 27th, 2023 meeting. 4 members of the 7-member commission were present, and all 4 members voted to recommend approval of the zoning change subject to a development agreement restricting occupancy to persons 55 and older. In the ensuing weeks, we've had some further conversations with the developer. They've agreed to provide such an agreement, and that does restrict occupancy to persons age 55 and older for any of the lots that are north of Northwest 69th Avenue. And there was also some public comment at the Planning Commission meeting seeking to have properties around Northwest 69th Avenue be platted as single-family detached rather than attached housing. So to accommodate that request, the developers also agreed to limit housing south of 69th Avenue to detached units. Those will not be governed by the age restriction. So everything north of 69th Avenue would be allowed to be attached, but governed by a development agreement restricting age to 55 and older. Anything under 69th Avenue could be detached units, but not governed by the same restriction. And they've provided that agreement. It's signed, and it's one of the items you're considering tonight.
Yeah, Aaron, so I just stop you there. So as I look at this map that you have kind of on the screen right now, that shows 2 by-attached.
That was the proposal as requested by the applicant. This was the original proposal.
So,
and so the development agreement you're considering tonight would require that these units be detached rather than attached units.
so
But
they
it's,
could be, they'd have to be, there's 2 lots there.
there's 2 lots there currently. Of course, they could be replatted. There could be more than 2 detached units there in the future.
Okay.
Not looking to change the density they've proposed, just the unit type. There was some pushback to attached units next to detached housing. And so what we're doing here is making an attempt to keep detached units adjacent or south of 69th Avenue.
Because then you have single family
break.
elements to to
Yep.
the south of that.
And this 69th would form a natural break between the detached and attached housing units. So it would be no change to the density of what they've requested. But it would allow or require detached housing south of 69th, but allow attached above it.
But the plan would still to be a total of 19.
Same number of units. Yep.
19 units.
The densities wouldn't change. Let me get back to where I was. The Johnston Thrive 2040 Future Land Use Plan depicts these properties west of Peckham as suburban residential, which is defined as housing with densities that generally range from 2 to 4 units per acre, with a mix of single-family detached and bi-attached dwellings. In the concept that was submitted by the applicant, depicting 19 units over 5.87 acres is a density of 3.08 units per acre. That is in compliance with the comprehensive plan. The proposed rezoning also supports several housing goals the city has established, city council has established in the Thrive 2040 comprehensive plan. For instance, the proposal supports goals found at page 118 of the comprehensive plan, which calls for the city to maintain a balanced housing supply with housing available for people at all income levels and unit types that meet the varying life cycle needs of Johnston residents. I need to get a tissue, just excuse me for 1 second. Another goal of the 2040 plan that this proposal satisfies is to establish a community of well-maintained housing in neighborhoods that include both owner-occupied and rental housing. These are both goals that were established by your Johnston 2040 comprehensive plan. When we look at adjacent land uses, they include single-family residential in the R1 100 district to the west, uses of the R1 100 district and R1 75 district to the north, opposite Northwest 70th Avenue, and uses of the C2 community retail commercial district and R3 medium density residential district to the east on the opposite side of Peckham Street. There's also R175 and R190 uses that abut the property to the south and southeast. And there is a depiction of that in the staff report. Those zoning classes. I did send notice to property owners within 320 feet of the proposed change, and there were signs placed to advertise the change at both the Northwest 70th Avenue and Peckham Street frontages. We did receive comment from public when this request was presented to the Planning Commission, and I did include minutes from that meeting as an attachment to the staff report. We've also continued to get a number of comments submitted by email. I've included those comments as well. The majority of those comments received have focused around speed and parking issues on Peckham, with some persons asserting any increase in the density at this location will create more speed and traffic on Peckham. And in response, the Public Works Department did collect some speed and traffic data through installation of speed monitoring radar signs. And the radar units collected data for both north and southbound traffic on Peckham. Over 5 days in March, the data indicates that the 85th percentile speed was 27 miles per hour. The posted speed is 25 miles per hour. According to speed study guidance developed by Iowa State University's Institute for Transportation, there's no concern present because the 85th percentile speed is not 5 miles per hour or greater than the posted speed limit. In addition to the speed data that was collected, staff reached out to the Johnston Police Department to inquire about speeding and or traffic concerns on Peckham Street. Lieutenant Stephen Knorr responded with a memo that I included as an attachment to your staff report. Lieutenant Knorr reported 21 speeding citations issued on Peckham from 2018 to present day, and 6 warnings issued in that same time frame. So that was from 2018 to present day. We also asked for a consulting engineer to take a quick look at trip generation. We were able to determine the proposed use will generate fewer trips a day than if it were developed under the current allowed uses. If those 12 properties were to develop as single-family detached uses with no age restriction, they would generate approximately 1,000, they would generate, I'm gonna have to maybe turn to Molly on this one. so I don't mess it up. But currently there's 950 trips per day on the roadway.
Yes, the current daily traffic on the road is 950 vehicles. If it was developed as 12 single-family detached units, it would generate about 150 additional trips a day, making the road volume 1,090 vehicles per day. If it's developed as the 19 units, 15 of them being age restricted attached units and 4 of them being single family detached units, they're going to generate like about 87 trips per day, and that equals about 1,030 vehicles per day on that road. So because of the senior piece, and there's actually been quite a lot more data available to us through the ITE trip generation manual, the trips generated by that type of housing is lower than a typical single family household.
So I think we're probably going to end up circling back to a lot of traffic questions a little bit further on. Let me go ahead and progress through the rest of this presentation, and I'm sure we'll get back to that. But what I didn't want to mess that up, that's why I called Molly up here. That was information that wasn't provided in your staff report because we just got it assembled today as we continue to take a deeper and closer look and address some of the concerns that have been brought up by the neighbors and some questions that were asked by the council. So what that data shows is that the proposed land use could generate less traffic than the land use that's allowed by the zoning class of the properties today. Another chief complaint issued is that the existing Brio facility does not have sufficient parking, and this causes a large number of vehicles to park on Peckham Street. There were some photos of on-street parking that were submitted with the staff report. Staff did go back to revisit the parking issue when we approved the Brio facility. We did note that the site plans were approved with a waiver for 15 parking stalls. I did go back through some aerials from several years and noted that the parking lot does not appear to be full in any of those aerials, nor are there any cars parked on the streets in those aerials. However, if the council would like to investigate this issue more fully, I'd recommend we take it up under separate request than the one at hand. They really are separate issues in my mind. If there's an existing condition caused by the Brio facility, probably doesn't have a lot to do with the land use on the other side of the street. In addition to the comments for the Planning Commission meeting and comments received by email, we've received a petition in opposition to the rezoning. There is language in both our city code and the code of Iowa, which stipulates that a certain number of property owners within a given radius of a property to be rezoned submit a petition in opposition of a rezoning. It requires a 4/5 majority vote of the council to approve said rezoning. And it does appear there are sufficient signatures to mandate a 4/5 vote of the council on this issue. However, I think we'd be remiss to not examine some language from the petition and not to pick it apart or try to invalidate the petition. And I won't go over some of the smaller issues, but I do want to clarify one thing for the benefit of any public who might have been confused by the petition. And that is that the petition states the request, Brio's request, will change the property from single-family residential zoning to multi-tenant and multi-family housing. And I want the council to recall that multi-family housing is a zoning district where our current ordinances that allows housing up to 16 units or more an acre. And that's a density that's not allowed by the R2 district. Then the R2 district is what the applicant is requesting. And multi-family housing is not what the applicant has proposed or requested. I'm asking you to consider 2 items tonight. One is a resolution approving a development agreement with Wesley Development Services that limits uses of lots 3 through 12 of Brio of Johnston Plat 2 to occupancy by persons 55 years of age and older, and limiting lots 1 and 2, and those are the 2 lots that are south of Northwest 69th Avenue, to single-family detached dwellings with no age restriction. The second item is first consideration of ordinance 1094, rezoning lots 1 through 12 of of Johnston Plat 2 to the R2 zoning district. And just like with your last request, I would remind you that state code does require you to take action on that development agreement prior to closing the public hearing. And with regard to ordinance 1094, of course, 3 readings are required at the council level prior to council approval. So tonight is the first reading and public hearing of ordinance 1094. We've all been here for a couple hours now, probably getting tired, so I'm going to keep my presentation short. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of public comment and lots of questions from the council. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to you at this point in time. If you have immediate questions for me, I'm happy to answer those. Otherwise, we can invite the applicant up as well. They have a group representing Wesley Life here in the audience tonight.
Why don't we go ahead and invite the applicant up, make their presentation. I would encourage everyone, because it is getting late tonight and I know you've been waiting a long time. You know, make your comments as succinct as possible. Try to avoid any repetition. And certainly if we have questions, we'll ask.
Was kind of hoping I was going to go last. Rob Kretzinger, CEO, 8105 Hatfield, Johnston. I've lived in Johnston for 27 years. Super excited to be having this project brought forward. I want to just review very quickly because I sent you some communications I hope you all received. But the success of Brio, which is causing us to go from single family to villas or townhomes. Brio has been a complete success right out of the ground. It's the only community, and I've probably been involved with 12 developments across the state of Iowa. It's the only one that opened completely full with a wait list. We've had over 700 inquiries of folks that want to live in independent living at Brio. And the vision behind Brio, it's the smallest campus we've ever developed, and it's in a residential area very intentionally. It's the only one. Used to be that retirement communities were built on the edge of town or in a commercial district or someplace that wasn't residential. And so the spirit of Brio is a very inclusive community, really to address ageism that we think exists in a lot of development. So it's been successful. We have a strong wait list. We have 12 interested parties from Johnston surrounding area that are interested in these townhomes without any formal marketing yet. So we're real confident that we'll be able to sell them briskly. I think the speed issue has been the one is interesting to us because I don't know if you truly understand a continuing care retirement community is different than a 55+ community. The folks that are moving there are attracted to the full continuum of care. That's what Brio is about. They have all levels of care there. The folks that will move to these townhomes will be they will be members to the full campus in the continuum. The average age of our residents is about 84 when they move in. People are living longer and healthier lives. The townhomes will be slightly younger at 82, which might seem older to you than what you think. But as I looked at the data that was provided from one of the neighbors, I think it was 3% of those folks over the age of 70 have speeding violations. And we took a little informal poll. We don't know if any Brio residents have had a speeding ticket. And frankly, the older adults that are moving into this, they're coming in and out, and they tend to have one car. And we're intentionally hoping they'll age in place in the townhomes. So I guess what I'd like is the opportunity at the end of this time when we hear what the opposition is, be able to come back up and answer any of those questions, unless you have some for me right now.
Does have any questions?
Rob, I'm familiar with your facility at Edgewater in West Des Moines, and I believe you have some townhomes out there as well. Are these going to be similar in nature?
They will be. So a couple things. All of our campuses have townhomes. This will be the only one except for one that we have in Illinois, Silvis, Illinois. The design of the townhomes are going to be as nice, if not nicer, than homes in the neighborhood. Very residentially designed. And we have moved, as I've said, to single family homes in that further outlet that's down. So it'll be very similar to Edgewater.
Yes, Mayor. Before you wander too far away, why not the age restriction on those south of 69th?
That was in direct response to neighbors' complaints.
And the plan for those two properties or those two lots south of 69th would have 4 then separate structures?
4 or 3. We are trying to space it out now that we've made the pivot from the townhomes to single family since we first put the application in.
And the, that is not by your choosing as much as what the encouragement was and
Yeah,
feedback
we're
was,
trying
correct?
to, comply with, concerns the neighbors had. We can still make it work. We need the townhomes, definitely that level of density. I think, what you heard the staff talk about, I don't think it's going to increase the traffic flow any more than the single family. If they were single, might be less actually.
If you were to maintain that same level of spacing, how many single or detached entities could you put north of 69th throughout your lots?
If they were all single family?
Yes.
I think originally it was 12.
It was originally 12, but there's also, it's originally 2 lots south of 60 and 69th.
Right.
And you're talking
2
about
wider lots than the residential lots there. So we would probably replat that to probably 3. Is probably where that, I think that's what we're looking at.
I'm Jeff Nesbick, Civil Design Advantage, 4121 Northwest Urbandale Drive, Urbandale, design firm for this project. Single family, or the detached single unit townhomes in this area. If we went with just the minimum 50-foot wide lot widths for this area, we would only lose probably 2 to 3. So we'd be down to probably about 8 or 17 to 16 lots in this area if we went to those.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question before you step down? These 2 or 3 detached that you're talking about, would you continue to own them? I mean, and put.
Yeah, they would, that's a great question. They would be part of the residency agreement to Brio.
Okay.
We just are saying now that we don't want to restrict those to 55. I think there were some questions that what if we sold later? We've never sold anything in 76 years. But we would, all of these units would be a direct residency agreement with Brio.
Okay.
This is a public hearing. Do we have others in the audience that would like to address the council?
Dustin Creech, 6706 Peckham Street, Johnston, Iowa. I've written some thoughts here. It's pretty late. My vision's not great. I'll do my best. I have kept this concise. I do want to say this will take about 10 to 12 minutes. I respect everybody's time, okay?
Could you maybe make it shorter than 10 or 12?
I wish I could, ma'am, and I have gotten this down to where it is. But I also am here speaking because I am speaking on behalf of 125 other folks. So I consider that not too bad, considering how you could have 125 other people here speaking in opposition. Let me begin, please. Good evening, Honorable Mayor Darrenfield and City Council. I'm here tonight to speak in opposition to the Brio rezoning on Peckham Street. I also bring with me and submit 126 names of residents in the surrounding neighborhoods who have signed in opposition of the Brio rezoning on Peckham Street. Following my attendance of the planning and zoning meeting, I left City Hall stunned by the fact that we did not even have one no vote by P&Z, despite the fact that all residential attendees were in opposition. I thought maybe we just didn't have enough people present. I thought, how many people would it take to send a message to City Council that this rezoning is not wanted? 20, 25, 50, 100 persons. So we created a formal petition to show y'all just how opposed the surrounding neighborhoods are to this rezoning. At the same time, I reached out to city planning staff as P&Z Commission suggested and told them that I have served for several years on the Green Meadows North HOA board as president and explained how we reached out several times over the years to Johnston Public Works and Johnston Police Department regarding speeding concerns on Peckham Street and streets in our neighborhood. I explained that although the city would place speed monitoring devices from time to time, speeding through our neighborhood persisted because the city never installed any traffic calming measures that would slow down vehicles. I sent suggestions to city planning staff of what I thought would be cost-effective solutions that would cost minimal dollars, but would go leaps and bounds in helping improve the conditions on Peckham Street. And I felt like I'm making a difference. And we as a community would see results. All of these positive things were happening, and I'm getting pumped up, and I'm starting to think, what can I say at the city council meeting on behalf of the 126 petition signers in opposition to the Brio rezoning on Peckham Street to convince y'all that this rezoning is not wanted, and convince y'all to vote no to this rezoning? And then Friday happened. And I read the report created by city planning staff for this meeting. I'm not sure if you've ever heard the saying that sometimes you cannot see the forest for the trees, but after reading the city planning staff report, I was finally able to see the big picture. I realized the oddities of the Planning and Zoning Commission saying that if the rezoning request to increase density had come from any entity other than Brio, they would likely vote no. I realized why it is that city staff seem to be of the opinion that this rezoning would likely go through. I realized that there was truth to what was told to me, that members of the Brio staff at their initial public forum were seemingly of the opinion that the rezoning was a done deal. That's
Sir,
what was told to
Could you
me.
get to the issues that this proposal presents for you? What are your concerns?
Miss, my concerns is that the city is not listening to the people. We have interacted with the city many times. We have not seen any changes on Peckham Street. That's the main concern.
You're concerned about the speeding on Peckham Street?
That is top priority. If you allow me to finish, that would be great.
Well, again, it's getting late. I understand that you have concerns. You've provided a lot of your concerns to us in writing.
Yes.
I don't think it does, it's not adding to the discussion here by going through and criticizing staff and criticizing the developer here. We want to hear what the issues are so that we can take those into consideration and consider those as we make a decision here tonight. We've heard speeding.
I understand.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? A thought, a proposal here? Yes, it has run long. We have been the last, at the planning and zoning meeting, it was about 9 o'clock before we could begin to speak. Here it is after 9 p.m. Are you in fact saying that perhaps maybe this would be best to table this for a future time?
No, what I'm saying is we want to hear what your concerns are. We don't want to hear, we don't want to hear, lengthy comments about your criticisms of our staff and criticisms of the developer. We want to hear what your concerns are about the proposal that's before us.
May I have some time to sit down and think about it and then approach later? Thank
Absolutely,
you.
absolutely.
Galante, 6705 Peckham Street. I've been on Johnston for 7 months. We moved in from Iowa City. I have the same concerns. You all received my letter, so I'm sure you read through it. The biggest concern I have is that one, from what I can see from our voters, that there was an agreement that this would stay single family housing. Okay, that's great. I'm sure at some point we'll either move on with that. But the biggest concern is that the traffic down that road. We need some traffic control on the road. We need some 3-way and 4-way stops at the end of just south of Brio on Wickham. There's a trail there. It's not marked. Okay, and there's people that come from Brio. I guess there's some that can walk around it. And plus our pedestrians are walking that way. So I would like to see the traffic control in place. Yes, I did put in a request to the city public works superintendent to put in the electronic radar signs. And the other request I had was, could you place a 25-mile-per-hour sign at the south end of Peckham? No, we can't do that. We only post one end. So they're coming out of Newgate
and they're running hard, even though Newgate's posted at 25, the speed picks up as they take the turn. And we got a lot of young kids on Peckham. So those are my concerns. I think if we can get some traffic controls in there and get some pedestrian crossing signs, it'll slow it down.
Thank you.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Frazier. I live at 6907 Northwest 93rd Street, just west to the proposal rezoning. I've got 5 things here listed. So number 1 is lack of communication and support. Yes, notice was given to us as the neighbors, but there was really actually no effort to work with us into this agreement or this proposal or project that affects the neighbors and the enjoyment of life and the property values. Yes, we did have like one little township meeting, but that was just one. And that was just, okay, here's our stuff. Have at it. Have a great evening. Second, the only 3 neighbors agreed to the project. So when notice was sent out and notice for signatures, to bypass the P&T committee, or I guess maybe the first reading, only 3 people agreed to it, and out of all the 300 or neighbors in the area. So it's not really much people who are agreeing to this. Brio is trying to force the development through without any effort to understand the neighbors' concerns and make modifications to their plans. And I know they said like, oh, they're trying to be amenable, they're trying to make stuff happen. So they dropped those 2 southern lots down to single or non-detached or detached. But I had concerns about the trees on the back line, which I don't think you really see in any of their plots or proposals, but I did bring a zoning map that does show the tree line that's going to be affected. That would be affected. I asked, would they keep them? Would they not keep them? I had a witty remark saying like, okay, the neighbors don't want to see me. I don't want to see them. Okay, well, that's just my concern, but it's not guaranteed. I mean, we've had at least 3 things this morning or this evening brought up about how important trees are. Yet there's nothing about the existing tree lines switch between the lots. Determining the effect on the city of Johnston detrimental. Driving from Beaver Creek Elementary School on 86th Street to the 70th Ave is a view of beautiful homes that give people an impression of a great community. But then the current proposal looks like the crowded cookie colored duplexes. Yes, I mean, they may look nice on the outside, but you never want to judge a book by its cover. It is like, oh, this is where the nice houses end. So you get to the end of 69th and boom, there's just townhomes, even though everything around is single family residential. Peckham Street is a gateway to a nice Johnston neighborhood. Like I said, again, cookie cutter duplex housing and R2 zoning is not compatible with that neighborhood. Yes, does that neighborhood allow for multifamily units? Sure, but are there any there? No, there's just Brio. Everything else is single family. Even the planning and zoning board chairman said he thought this was way too many duplexes lined up together. He suggested the south 5 lots of the proposal be changed to single family. So I'm not sure how only the first 2 lots 1 and 2 south of 69th got the single family or the non-detached or detached, but even Petersma asked for all 5 lots to be single family because it is too dense. And that looks like it hasn't been addressed. The problems with the specific proposal, the 2 duplexes south of 69th Ave shouldn't be part of duplex row. The zoning on this block and neighborhood is consistent single family housing. Again, they are going to detach, but you're about to cram 3 or 4 at the end right there. And even on the north side of a trail where pedestrians currently use and cross as heavy use by bikers, runners, things like that. Current plat shows 4 plots between 69th Ave and the cul-de-sac on the north side of 69th. Changing it to 3 barely makes a minimal width for the 3 crowded duplexes. So currently right now it's plotted for 4 and we're changing it to 3 so we can shove more houses on there. Let's see, the first 2 houses north of 69th Ave are so close to wooded area that many trees would have to be cut just to have any backyard possible. Right now, I'm pretty sure there's no setback or minimal that's required for a setback between the lots, on the east and west. And that's going to be the issue, is that to give them any appeal of a backyard, you're going to take all of those trees down. And there's been nothing said about that. And again, all the permitted or proposed settings or drawings have no tree lines. Let's see, the specific use permit should be required. Current zoning kept for all these duplexes. Only 2 or 3 should be allowed so the character of the neighborhood can be preserved instead of, again, that cookie cutter barracks look. Safety issues, again, this is something we're all harping on. They said something about like, oh, we're only getting like the proposed will decrease the amount of trips by 60. I mean, I don't understand how that could be, because if that 55 and plus, who here is 55 and older? Everyone? Two cars per family, at least 2 cars? 4, okay. So we're not setting, the limit is set to 55 and older.
Yeah.
There's nothing saying that a 55-year-old or older can move in there and then have 4 cars.
Well,
Can't
that's a,
Sure, the median age is 82, but there's nothing stopping that from happening.
that's a different, we'll talk about that later.
Sure, but we're saying that parking shouldn't be part of this proposal, but it should be, because it does affect everything. All right, it affects the fact that cars have to go around, faster, and someone's trying to cross the street, boom, accidents. Deferral, more time discussed. I just think that this, I would ask that this project needs to be a short postponement for the meeting to be held with a council member committee, interested neighbors and developers. And so we know how this is developed and to keep Johnston a great place. They said the waiting list is they have 12 people. I mean, if that's the requirements, then we need more pharmacies. I'm a pharmacist. I have more than 12 people on lines. Urgent cares have more than 12 people waiting in the waiting room. Does that mean we need more urgent cares and we should build one there? I don't think like the waiting list of 12 should be a high criteria to be considered. Then I will end with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Joanne Manning. I live at 6821 Northwest 93rd Street. I have a couple of questions and just clarification. I think that Brio and Wesley Life, they're going to do a great job. I think this is going to all shake out to be really nice. I do, neighbors. I think we need to calm down a little bit, but I have I need some questions answered about, is in the development agreement, is there a buffer zone currently for the existing homes and what's coming? Because I know a lot of that tree line is a lot of scruff. So I'm sure you're going to have to take a lot of that out. So is there a plan in place for that? Also, my question about, I'm happy that they're detached. I think one of the things, I sell a lot of real estate in Johnston, and one of the reasons people come here, and I know your model is different, but it's for the lower density. And so for me, speeding is not the biggest deal. For me, it's the density there and how it fits into the rest of the neighborhood. What's the average age you said when people start coming into Brio?
84.
So those 3 or 4 that are on closest to 69, there's no age requirement, but it's still a continuing part of that. So who's going to?
Make that 55 plus as well.
I think that makes sense.
Okay, if you
Anyway,
could,
that's all I needed. I just had a couple questions and a
we'll make sure
recommendation.
you get answers to them.
Okay, thank you.
Robin Middendorf, 6822. I literally butt right up next to Borough, and they have been great neighbors. I appreciate the thought of bringing those next to land, the plot 1 and 2 to single. And I guess it really goes back to what we were saying is really the feel for our neighborhood. We literally butt up to, and no offense, but now commercial. So yes, $500,000 homes. Now you go past that section, and to have it be the duplexes or a bureau is definitely a change in our location. So the 55 plus, I don't think that was ever a concern. So to make that back to 55 would probably be preferred, honestly.
Are there others in the audience that would like to make comments? Well, did you want to make some comments?
I would just like to say this. I think that I have just witnessed 2, 3 people rush through presentations because we're at the end of the evening here. And I'm not sure how much, how well we can convey our stance in such a short allotment of time. But I will just end with this. I think that you as the city council, you represent both the developers in the community and also the residents that live in the community. I think that if you have read my letters that I've submitted to the city, or my letter that I've submitted to the city, you see that we have concerns in there that are going unaddressed. You see for safety, for speeders. And I just ask that tonight, when you vote, you take into consideration the numerous homeowners that have signed in opposition to this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Want to quickly respond to some of these, just so that there's clarity as you take vote. One is the preservation of the green space. We want to keep all those trees. We're willing to commit to that in the development agreement, but there's some really bad trees that neighbors have told us keep, they're dead trees. We're going to remove those. But all of our communities, and even Brio now is mature enough over 3 or 4 years, we're going to be adding a lot of landscape back into these spaces. We're connecting to the trail system. That's important for a walkable community. So that I don't think there's anything to worry about with that, but we'd be glad to work that out in the development agreement. I want to be clear about the market. So it's not just a wait list of 12. 12 have volunteered that they want to move to this place if you build townhomes. That's without any marketing. And 700 inquiries of people in Johnston surrounding area that want to be at Brio have inquired about that. And I only bring that up because if we did anything wrong, we probably have done a lot of things wrong perhaps, but we built too small. And the intention there was to scale this to be residential. We've won a national award for this campus because it looks so residential, not commercial. And I know it's hard to do when you're trying to make a campus, but it is a residential scale. And these villas, the design of the villas are going to be as nice, not nicer than some of the homes in the community. So I'm not concerned about that. And in terms of finally on speed, the people that are going to live in the villas are going to come in and leave back out on 70th. They're not, I don't know what everybody's going to further in the neighborhood unless they're going to their house. But they're not going to, there's nothing in there that they want. They're going to get in their townhome and they're going to leave and go do what they want. So, and we have, we'll put up speeding or whatever we can do to slow speed down there. But it's not our residents doing this. So I'll leave it at that.
Rob,
Yeah.
real quick. You described this in your initial comments as part of your continuum of care.
Right.
What does that mean in terms of the residents that will live?
Sure. So someone that purchases a townhome, it's an entrance fee that's refundable and they pay a monthly membership fee and they're guaranteed access to the assisted living, the memory care area, the skilled nursing area over and against anyone else outside. And that creates value for them. So it's a lifestyle and healthcare continuum, and they'll take part in the wellness programs that are there. There's a culinary program. We still have another outlot to develop. And we think that, culinary piece and all of that is important for this isn't just like buying a row of duplexes. If it's been described to you that way, it's not a row of duplexes. We build things for, forever. So these are custom built for people and hope that helps.
So these are people who have identified themselves as needing the care that you have to offer.
Yes, and they're older but more active, and they're going to free up houses in Johnston that'll be available for sale as well, which I think is a good thing. So. Thank you.
I do want to address one thing about the trees that was spoken. The southern lots that are going to be detached, south part of those actually have a stream setback in there. So there will be a natural buffer that's existing already between those detached townhomes on the south and the existing houses. That will remain there too as well.
Aaron, do you want to respond to some of the other concerns?
Traffic stuff again, and while we got Molly here, since I made her stay all evening, she might be able to address some of those as well. I know I heard from a few people who brought up the issue about the stop signs again, and maybe turn it over to, can you log us back in here? I provided you with some information in the staff report that talked about how stop signs don't really always slow down traffic. I provided you even a link to some resources at Iowa State that could help explain the issue why. But I also thought you might want to hear it from a traffic engineer who's here. At the same time, I know Mr. Gallant mentioned that there's a trail crossing on Peckham that's not marked, and he'd like to see that marked. The fact that he brought that to our attention, I turned to our public works director, asked Matt about it. Matt said, I don't know why that's not signed, but we need to get a sign there. And I think you've already ordered your guys to get a sign out there. So Matt's addressing that trail crossing issue. I would also maybe, after Molly's done, defer to Matt too on placing another speed limit sign. I don't know what your policies are on that, but I think that's more of a public works thing. So, I mean, maybe just Molly, would adding more stop signs there, would that help anything? If, for one, we did do some data radar testing. It showed that maybe speeding's not an issue, but I'm not denying what these gentlemen are saying, but maybe there needs to be further other additional days where we monitor the speed, but do stop signs, slow down traffic.
We typically don't install stop signs unless they're needed. They are not useful when you're talking about traffic calming and slowing people down, because what happens is people will stop, but then they will speed up to get to the next stop sign. So it's not really addressing the behavior that you're trying to, stop. So we don't recommend that. We have stop sign warrants that we can, do at the intersection. They're based on volume, crash history. I haven't looked at it, but I'm guessing that stop signs wouldn't be warranted at that intersection.
Can I ask you a question, Mark?
Yeah.
So, sorry. Stop sign might not help. Will a bump in the road help? A speed bump like that?
So that we have a whole toolbox of traffic calming things that we can do. One of them is a speed table or a raised crossing. I know Matt's not in favor of that, but we have also done some things on Newgate that that have calmed the traffic. You can bring the curbs out to make the crossing shorter for pedestrians in certain locations. You can put an island in the middle of the road and make the lanes narrower on each side of the island. I mean, there's lots of things. There's lots of other things you can do also. Actually, cars parked on the street are a traffic calming measure. So there are different things that we could look at, especially with that trail crossing. We've done that at other trail crossings in the city, put those islands in, slow the traffic down.
Okay, that's good choice. The one question. Second question, you took this reading of the speed one day in spring, winter?
They did it in March.
5 days, late March. 21st to the 26th.
Yep.
Of March.
Yes.
So like 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
Right, okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, understand, but so winter and spring, less amount of traffic. Summer, the traffic increases quite a bit. People drive out. Winter, not much. So I think that data that you have might not be the best data to take.
Yeah, Suresh, I would disagree because it's schools in session, right? So I would strongly disagree with that because I think one of the biggest drivers of traffic in this neighborhood is students.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, so they're going, you have, so that I would disagree with your assessment there that it would be significant.
Maybe I'm wrong, but the school is on 100th Street and this Peckham is on.
But going to high school, going to the middle school, I mean, you would be, I can tell you as somebody who has a 17-year-old who drives to high school and a 9th grader who drives to the middle school, so I would just disagree that March, I mean, I think now, I mean, that's a time period that was not like heavy snow or bad weather or stuff like that. So I would just disagree that those. That's
I appreciate that.
So when the DOT does they scrub their traffic count data and they kind of normalize it to get that average annual daily traffic, the actual 1.0 that they off usually falls between March and April. So.
Right, that's the data I did not know, but thank you for the information.
Tim?
Because these people on the one side of the street are going to be needing to get to the other side of the street to use the services, are we gonna have to provide a crosswalk or are we gonna need, that's gonna be a natural traffic calming thing, but how are they gonna get across?
There is a trail crossing here just south of the Brio facility. It's actually shown here in the staff report. We could probably zoom out further and I could show you where that's at, but there's also, I mean, there's crossings up at the roundabout, is there not? To get across, there's trail on the south side of Northwest 70th Avenue and a crossing there. So here you can see there's a crossing right here at the roundabout. And also as you come down, there's a existing trail system here.
But
and a
Aaron,
trail.
certainly you're going to want to have something that's closer to the.
It's something we would look at with the plating
Right, I mean,
process.
nobody's going to walk all the way up to. 70.
It's something we would look at with the plating process and not really something that we would figure out with the rezoning. The rezonings, the bigger picture, the higher level, we look at density and land use. When we get down to the nitty gritties about trail crossings, that's really a plat issue.
Whereas street crossing is what you're going to want to have a.
Well,
street
that's what I, street crossings, that would be a platting issue that we would look at.
Right, and that's where some of these issues that have been raised today, whether the trees are, and those are all things that are not part of the zoning process. That really come out more in the platting process, and so that's where that kind of comes up, so. I mean, I think, and I think we've heard kind of from the residents. I think that, Molly, I'm trying to talk to these. Go ahead. If you want to say something, go ahead.
I just had one more thing I wanted to say about the speeding. So the 5 mile an hour, the 85th percentile speed was 27 miles per hour. Look at that 5 mile an hour over the speed limit range. So when you look at the data that was collected, 90% of the people are within that 5 mile an hour over range and below.
So, right, it's not like it's.
And I looked up FHWA and NHTSA, which is traffic safety, and then the Insurance Institute. They all did a speed study over the entire United States, and typical amount of speeding on arterials and collector streets range between 12% and 19%. So, you know, we're normal.
Molly, can you comment at all about what we could expect the traffic pattern of these residents might be? Mr. Kretzinger suggested that, probably people living in this area would go to 70th Avenue. That would be their way of in and out of the neighborhood that they live in,
that would
as
be,
opposed to going through the other residential neighborhood to the south of them.
that would be their most direct route to services. I mean, to get to the library, you're gonna go across on 70th. To get to Walmart, Menards, you're gonna go up to 70th. To get, to the grocery store, you're going that way, or over to Merle Hay Road, weaving through the neighborhood. Typically not people's route of choice. Yeah, they could get to 86 going down Peckham and Newgate. That is a path that they could use to get to 86th Street. But they can also go north to 70th and turn right on 86th Street too. So less turns.
You can make right-hand turns.
Yeah.
Yes.
If the statistics are showing what you're showing, and you're not gonna put in there, stop signs don't look like a feasible answer.
Please use a microphone.
Stop signs don't look like a feasible answer, then I think, if you could put a 25 mile per hour sign down the south end, and then one again at Peckham, at Enfield. Because as you mentioned, one of you mentioned you have students, right? If you come out of Enfield, they come out of the school and they run down on Enfield and take a left on Peckham, okay? And this past winter, whoever it was doing donuts there in the snow, but I mean, that doesn't mean anything. But if we could put 2 25 mile per hour signs on that road. I've seen it over on Camp Cardinal Drive where they put these 2-foot speed road bumps, like you had mentioned. Those seem to work.
Lou, before you leave, have you been on Newgate?
I've been on Newgate.
And have you seen the island that is?
Yeah,
in the
I'm
middle?
very familiar. I come on Newgate all the time, yeah.
And does that cause a problem for you? Because I think we've slowed down the traffic pretty well and provided places for the kids to cross.
Yeah, that works. I mean, that concept can work, and it would probably help slow it down.
Thank you.
Only thing I thought on that when I first moved here, I thought plows were gonna have a hard time with it.
Well, that's what, and that's that's where the public works guys, they get, they don't love all those different things, even, but the thing is that's where it's important to have the dialogue to say, hey, look, we understand you don't really like this from a public works standpoint and how the plows are going to manage it, but we do have to manage the speed. And I think, and this is something I've been trying to say for about 10 minutes, and you can go ahead and sit down.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's perfectly logical for the folks who got concerns about this and the speed and the amount of traffic on Peckham. You're making a point that I think is very legitimate. But that being said, I don't think that this Brio development is the problem. All right. That isn't the problem. These 19 more units, the amount of impact that that's going to have. And I understand you're going to disagree with that, Mr. Creech, because, no, we're not going to have a debate. Okay. We're past that point. The problem is I think is that to a certain extent, you have people who always, the main routes here are 86th Street and 100th Street, right? And those are 14 blocks away. And people are always looking for a way to cut through. I'll tell you my personal experience. My daughter has friends who live north on Peckham, north of 70th. And we got 6 or 7 girls in the van. We're taking them home from a softball event. And one of them lives north of there. And one of them lives south of 62nd. And so it's like, hey, I'll try to go through as a cut through. And as I started to go through there, I thought, this was the dumbest idea I've ever made, because you go down and then you run into Newgate and you're not really sure, do I go left or right at that point? It is a kind of a cut through, but it's not, these 19 residents are not going to impact that. So from my standpoint, I understand what you're saying. And I think we need to be very aggressive at addressing these concerns about speed and how to calm the traffic. I think your concerns are very legitimate. And I think we really need to investigate those, whether it's, crossings that'll occur because of these residents crossing or crossing at the trail. I think we need to look at all of those things and look to add maybe some stop signs. I think those are are not stop signs necessarily, but look at some traffic calming measures that can be very effective, like the island at Newgate or those types of things. I think we should look at all those things, but I don't believe that this project is going to be causing the problem. And you know what? And I'm not sure, it'll be interesting of the 100 and some odd people who signed the petition, if they heard this full discussion and they would understand that this isn't some multifamily apartment complex going in, that it's 19 units that are going to generate basically the same amount of traffic as 12 single family homes. The amount of difference there is probably not much, if any difference. I think most people would say, now that I know that, I'm not sure I'd sign the petition. So I think that's just an important item that people need to understand. I think you're making great points, and I think we need to work on them. And you may completely think that I'm out of line for saying that, but I feel really strongly that I think you're making great points. But I also think this development's not going to be a hindrance. I think it's going to be a great development for the city of Johnston. And that's why I'm supportive of it. And I hope we approve it tonight, or if not tonight, pretty soon, because I think it's going to be a really positive development for the city of Johnston.
This is still a public hearing. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to address the council?
Hi, my name is Ellen Young and I live at 6825 Northwest 93rd Street. My name is in the thing and I saw it today and I was like, yikes, I don't normally speak up, but I have 4 kids. My husband has multiple sclerosis. We back up to the creek and the properties. I have an elevator in my home. This is my forever home. My kids use that bike trail all the time. We have a play set on the bike trail and people think it's a park. And I tell people, play on my playground. Everybody play on my playground. My kids, they take off down that bike trail and they'll run straight into the road. So the Newgate ideas, love it. All these things, I love it. I love Brio. They're a great neighbor. I wish you would have been at the open house. I wish you would have been at the planning and zoning committee. And I think that would have calmed a lot of the nerves, because I think the discussion here has been much more positive than it's been up until this point. So I just want to say I appreciate you. And I think the 55 plus is great. My grandparents lived in Oaknell and Iowa City. that's a stepping stone. They went through this program. It was wonderful. I think it is an asset to our community, and I thank you for listening. Thanks.
Is there anyone else that would like to address the council?
I mean, I'll say that I agree that, you know, this development.
Could you come forward, please?
Just reiterate that I do kind of agree that with the Councilman Tom, that, you know, this development won't add to the speeding or safety issues that are currently existing. But I guess it just is this development is bringing to light the current issues. And I guess we're just trying to blame it on the development, which is not fair, but it is, I mean, to say that with these new houses will come more traffic or just traffic in general is, I guess, the general concern. And that's why this is coming to light.
And we appreciate that. And we're glad that you're here and that you're identifying these issues for us so that we can duly note them and we can come up with some ideas on how we can address them. So really do appreciate it. Okay, we have to, before I can close the public hearing, you need to take action on resolution number 2377. Do we have a motion?
This is the development agreement.
This is the development agreement.
This development agreement says that they will not require 55 and older for the 2 southern lots.
That's what this development agreement says, and the area that's comprised of the 2 lots. Now, again, it could be further subdivided to allow for detached in the future.
From what I've heard here, I've heard people say they're not concerned about this being a 55, if we continue with the original intent that it was a 55 and older detached properties. So I would make an amendment to say that we should put it back as 55 or older for the 2 southern properties, which may be combined to 3 units.
I would second the amendment. And if you look at the development agreement, it talks under item 1, it talks about, there's language in there about housing for older persons. You can just take that same language and add that to the bullet point that talks about lots 1 and 2. So I think that's a good amendment. I don't think we're getting any too concerns from that. So.
And as long as the developers.
Christine, procedurally? on
Yeah,
that?
as a point of clarification, the code does say that any conditions that are placed on the rezoning have to be agreed to in writing by the developer. So we would need the developer to agree that, you know, this modification can be initialed and approved on the development agreement. And that they're okay with that technically not occurring prior to the close of the public hearing.
Should we do that tonight?
I mean, to be absolutely proper in compliance with the code, it would be better to delay so that we can have that signed and approved prior to the close of the public hearing.
Well, I don't want to delay. So is there a different way that we could?
When can a development agreement be amended? If we were to pass this the way it is tonight, could we come back and amend it at a future
It's part
date?
of the ordinance. So any amendments to the development agreement would require an ordinance amendment.
How difficult is this amendment? Can we just write
Yeah,
2
we
or
can
3
write it
words
and
on
initial
here
it
and
on
get
the document. If the developer is.
You can bracket this and just apply it to that second bullet.
It's not in the development agreement. Technically, there's no code required buffer requirement between these 2 types of housing. However, you can require a buffer if you wish. It sounds like the developer wants to maintain as many of those trees as possible. I don't know if that's something we want to incorporate into a development agreement as part of the rezoning, or if it's something we want to. I guess I would look to
I think we
David
could-
here for
I
recommendation.
think the buffer, I would feel comfortable dealing with that at the site plan.
But, well, and you won't necessarily see a site plan, but you'll see a plat. And so that would be the point.
Will the plat have a survey that shows the land, the trees?
I think we should require that. We should give staff direction.
Generally, yeah, plat that's submitted with a new subdivision and have a tree removal plan shown with it. So they would
Well,
have to
then
show
we
any
can
trees to
deal
be
with it
removed.
at that time.
What's the problem with tabling this? Is there a problem?
I don't, if you want to make a motion to table it and there's enough.
If you wanted to table it till the end of the meeting, I can come back with a
It seems like
revised
we can
development agreement
remedy
for.
this tonight. Yeah.
I don't want to table it. If you want to table, you can make a motion. Okay.
If you wanted to table it now and come back to it at the end of the meeting, I could step away and work on a development agreement.
I would suggest we do that because we have other action items to take care of this evening.
Would that be procedurally
It would be
okay?
to,
Table it until we'll just kind of table it at this point in time, but come back to it at the end of the meeting.
the public hearing, yes, we're not closing the public hearing, so we're deferring the.
And then I
public
can
hearing
step
till the
away
end
and
of the
work on a
meeting.
revised development agreement. And we can revisit this at the end of the meeting.
Council's in
Is that?
agreement with that.
But the only revision we're making to the development agreement is adding the 55 plus to the two lots 1 and 2. Agreed?
Correct.
That
What-
would be
what-
my understanding.
What I would suggest is we'll just change the language that everything in that plat two would be restricted. An easy change.
If we're going to table this until later, that means we cannot vote on the zoning change at this time
Correct.
until this is done. And I've already seen some people leaving.
So it's
So I would like to make some comments before they leave because I feel like there is an expectation this is going to pass.
really quickly, let me make a point of information on the development agreement. Under section 1 there, I've got it on the screen here. I think in this first sentence, you could just change that to lots 1 through 12. And then you could cross out the second bullet point, and I think you've accomplished what you want to accomplish.
What is the change that's necessary?
So if you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'll go back down. This number 1 item here, it says housing constructed upon property currently described as lots 3 to 12. We would change that to lots 1 to 12.
Could somebody make that change and print it off? Because I don't think I have a copy in my packet here. Can you just go ahead and make that change and print it off?
I don't know that I can get on the server from here.
Or just while we're.
So that you would change that first bullet point to lots 1 through 12, and then you would cross out this second bullet point in its entirety. Excuse me. No, I take that back. You would simply modify the first bullet point to lots 1 through 12 and leave the second bullet.
Why don't we defer on this temporarily while that's taken care of? And let's proceed through the rest of the agenda. And then we'll come back to this.
And meanwhile, Aaron, while you're, or somebody from staff needs to print it off. So we have a revised item.
Yeah.
So a motion to adjourn the public hearing until the end of the meeting would be in order.
So moved.
Second,
Discussion? Sam, vote please.
Martin,
yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Okay, let's take up the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, a second discussion? Sam, vote please.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to the non-consent agenda. Item 7A, consider third and final consideration, adoption and publishing of ordinance number 1090, repealing and replacing chapters 165 through 180, the Johnston zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations.
This is third reading. The changes that were approved at the second reading have been incorporated into the ordinance and no further changes are proposed with third reading.
Also, have any questions for David? Do we have a motion to approve third and final consideration?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second,
And to adopt and publish.
and to adopt and publish.
Cope,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Burkhart.
Yes.
Motion passed. 7B, consider approval of resolution number 2372, approving a list of desirable trees and shrubs, prohibited trees and shrubs, and temporarily suspended trees and shrubs.
It's a mouthful. All credit on this list goes to the tree board, Councilmember Martin, Clayton Ender on our staff really worked hard on this. This supplements the zoning code. And so there are a couple of places where we reference the adopted tree list. So what we're doing here is adopting the tree list that's referenced in the zoning code. Just being done by resolution, so it'll be easy to amend over time. If there are changes, if there's a new bug, a beetle, whatever, it'll be easy to modify, and the tree board will help us keep that up to date. I think they've been willing to do that. So if you have questions, don't ask me. I am not the tree expert. Yeah.
But as David says, it'll be easy for us to put an item on or take an item off in this manner to keep it up to date. It gives us flexibility.
But there was a lot of discussion of how this should look, and I mean, it's super easy friendly. They really did a nice job.
Yeah, I love like the steep slope. You pull those out and repair and all that. That's cool.
And even though it says things like undesirable or even prohibited, we're talking about city. You know, when it's part of a requirement for development, or if it's a streetscape or whatever, you want to plant that thing on your own property, go ahead.
You want to plant an undesirable tree, we're not going to stop you.
Great.
The only comment I have is on, I don't know what page this is. Prohibited and temporarily suspended trees and shrubs, planting of the following are prohibited or temporarily suspended. And then it says note 1, shall temporarily suspended from planting within the city of Johnston. And then note 2, shall not be planted within the city of Johnston. I think it should say right away or public ground. Because my neighbor, I'm sure he will.
You'll plant a new tree.
Well, he'll, you know, does that mean I can't plant a burning bush in my backyard? In the beginning, it says, it mentions the right of way, but here in this, I think it's one of the last pages.
It does say within the city. We don't have control over the city of Johnston.
Yeah, the earlier note 2 on the earlier one says right away. Yeah, I think that's probably for note 2. I think it should be right away.
That's right.
At the end of the first sentence.
Yeah.
Any tree or shrub listed as prohibited shall not be planted within the city of Johnston right of way. Which makes sense because the city arborist would be normally approving tree permits, right of way permits and right of way.
How about no 1?
That,
This,
About-
is
about
this
no-
going through 3 times or is this?
no,
it?
this is just a resolution.
And again, it's easy to amend.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could include your motion that be
Okay.
added and we'll just make the change. That's a pretty straightforward and easy.
So I guess I'll make a motion to do something and add in public right away.
Yeah, it's resolution 2372 and the amendment would be to,
Clarify that these lists are covering city right of way.
specifically note 2 under prohibited and temporary suspended trees and shrubs would reference right of way. I think if that's part of your motion, that's clarification we need.
Okay.
Somebody will listen to the 4 hours of tape and get the correct
Will
wording.
you second this?
Second,
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second discussion. Sam, vote please.
Martin,
yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Item 7C, consider third and final consideration, adoption and publishing of ordinance number 1091, repealing and replacing chapter 102 storm drainage system, chapter 103 stormwater management utility, Chapter 145, post-construction stormwater management, and Chapter 151, tree protection and conservation.
Third consideration, no changes since the original public hearing on these. So
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion.
Oh, adopt and publish.
Yeah, third consideration and to adopt and publish.
Ready?
Discussion?
Oh,
Yes.
Continue.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope.
Yes.
Motion passed. Item 7D, consider approval of resolution number 2373, adopting the supplemental specifications to the Iowa Stormwater Management Manual.
So the ordinance you just adopted includes reference and adoption of the Iowa Stormwater Management Manual. As we work through that, similar to how we've done with SUDA standards, the statewide urban design and specification standards, we adopt a supplemental to that gives further guidance or direction or makes changes specific to Johnston. So this would be the same action that we'd be doing here. We'd be adopting a supplemental spec to ISWIM that would give further guidance to design engineers on Johnston specific. So again, if you ask me detailed questions, I'm gonna have to refer to Josh at Foth, who's really done the work on this, but this is kind of the final piece of adopting and getting all our stormwater requirements finalized and changed.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion. Sam, vote please.
Martin,
Yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion passed. Item 7E, consider third and final consideration, adoption and publishing of ordinance number 1092, adopting an official zoning map.
Again, this third consideration, no changes from previous.
Move approval.
We have a motion and a second to approve third consideration and to adopt and publish. Any discussion? Sam, vote please.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Motion passed. Item 7F, consider approval of claims in the amount of $966,612.06.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion. Sam, vote please.
Cope,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Burkhart.
Yes.
Motion passed. We've already covered city administrator staff comments, city council comments. So we're just waiting for the resolution to come back.
So while we're waiting for them to come back, I did want to make a few comments about this proposal.
I think maybe you need to wait until we get it.
Do we open the public hearing or?
Because we need to bring it back up again.
Can't we open it while they're still discussing?
We don't have an item before us. I think we should wait.
Where's
Somebody's
the-
printing something.
Okay, Mike, where's the pizza? I think I told you earlier today that this was gonna need some pizza around 9:30. And it's almost 11, so you're late in getting the pizza here.
I am very late. I'm thinking this is in the running in 22 years of probably the longest council or the latest I've been in a council meeting.
Not sure it's our latest.
The wild thing is how we'll go for the next.
I am not joking.
This is rare for us, but we've done this before.
It does seem like one controversy breeds controversy, right? I mean, it's
It
like,
does.
I will, before I was going to save it for the public meeting, but I want to make sure though that all of our residents have their chance to share their voice. I don't like the fact that I feel like they got rushed.
oh, I disagree that they were rushed. I thought we gave them plenty of opportunity.
I disagree.
And I think we can disagree on that, but I thought, in fact, people spoke multiple times. There's one gentleman who maybe felt like he was rushed, but
He spoke very fast.
but I just disagree with that perspective, so.
It's unfortunate that this came the fifth item on the agenda when the other four public hearings got plenty of time without having that same.
And I think that there, it's fair to, I mean, I do think it makes sense for staff to maybe think a little bit about, all right, this might be the most controversial item. Let's move it to the top. I always sort of, it's just always weird to me somehow how the most controversial item falls to the bottom. And so I do think as you plan the agenda, I think you should take that into account. And I realize sometimes you don't know until it's pretty late, but I think to the extent you can look at what happened at P and Z and some of those things to kind of figure it out.
And we can talk about
Yeah.
philosophy on setting on the agenda. A lot of times we set the most controversial to be at the end. And we usually set the most controversial items to be at the end. And at least in my past practice, we've done it because we want to get the other
Okay,
people
here we go.
out.
Yeah, and I think we may want to rethink that a little bit.
We ready for me or you want someone to write it down?
No, we're waiting for you.
This is a vision.
Okay.
We need to sign by both parties.
Right.
We need a Brio signature. And I think technically it's supposed to be notarized.
Why don't we, Rob, why don't you wait until we,
Look at, the printer's not cooperating, so we've got some more coming.
there you go.
Save a tree. They're beneficial.
1 through 12.
We really only made the one change, and that was to modify the bullet point to read lots 1 to 12, meaning.
The second page is not here on mine.
Just for
I'm having a lot of trouble with the printer.
clarification, we should read.
No, but the second bullet, there was 2 bullets here.
I know,
Yeah, but
and
he's-
I was just
Okay,
assuming they got
let's,
rid of it.
let's bring a little order to this. Christine, what do we need to do?
Reopen the public hearing, motion to reopen the public hearing.
We have
or
a-
The mayor, you can do it yourself since you opened the public hearing, so
Oh, we had a motion to
adjourn,
adjourn it,
Yeah.
so we need to,
reopen or
Yeah.
reconvene the public hearing.
do we have a motion to reconvene the public hearing?
So moved.
Second,
We have a motion and a second discussion. Sam, vote please.
Martin,
yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Ready,
Yeah.
Evans.
Motion passed. Okay. Need to go back to our agenda. Item that we have before us is public hearing and consideration of resolution number 2377 to approve a development agreement with Wesley Development Services. And we also have first reading of ordinance number 1094, approving an official zoning map amendment for approximately 5.87 acres. And this relates to the Wesley Development proposal as well. Aaron?
Yeah, so we talked about making some corrections to the development agreement or amendments to the development agreement. I simply changed the language to read lots 1 through 12. That is where the senior restriction would apply. I think that's what the public were requesting, that it apply to all lots, the senior restriction.
Yeah, I think the only question that I have is, do you have this electronically available on the screen?
I did, unfortunately, I had it on thumb drive. Nothing's working tonight for me. If you haven't noticed, I can go get it.
Well, go back to the original, the last version.
Okay.
Because you just went past it. There you go.
Development agreement. Okay, this is as was originally
Yes.
presented.
Right. And so, okay, keep going. Okay, that's bullet point that says housing is constructed upon property currently described as lots 1 and 2. That bullet is, I don't see that in this document.
Yeah, it's when I got, like I said, nothing's working tonight. When I got over there, the printer was out of paper. I put new paper in the printer. Then we had another print job that started printing. When I finally got mine to print, it looks like it left off the second page, so 5 more minutes, I can get this straightened out. I thought I
have
had
all
it.
4 pages.
You have all 4?
Yes.
Okay, it's theirs that don't.
As long as it's,
Yeah,
as long as
yeah,
that second bullet. is
The
there.
only change was the change made to this first bullet point that says lots 3 to 12, and I changed it to 1 to 12.
They keep doing this, sleight of hand business.
Aaron, where is the change?
The first bullet
Okay,
point,
1 through 12. Okay.
it should say lots 1 to 12.
Okay, let's,
There was some concern. I just want it to be noted on my way out. Some of the residents were stating that they wanted this development agreement to mention the buffer. We do have to come back and replat these properties. At that point in time, the developer would be required to show us a tree removal plan. And we could try to negotiate through the buffer process at that point in time if you're agreeable to that. But they were concerned that by not addressing it in this development agreement, that you're giving up the control over that issue. I told them I would just note that to you.
So when it's, there will be a replatting, correct?
They will have to,
I'm looking at them as much as I am you, so. And so as part of the replatting, I think we can give direction to staff that when the replatting comes back, that additionally, all tree removal, all those items are incorporated into that item at that point. I think that gives sufficient protection to the residents, and I don't think we need to modify the development agreement further. That's just one legal issue.
I'm comfortable with, as you described, that we will address the issue that is, the neighbor's concern that there's still going to be some plantings that are buffered, but they have to have the ability to, get enough room on that site to put their buildings up. I believe that we will handle it during the platting process when their tree removal plans are provided to us. So I do not believe at this time we should add that to the development agreement. It messes things up.
okay, we are still in the public hearing. We need to take action on resolution number 2377, approving the development agreement.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion. Sam, vote please.
Ready,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope.
Yes.
Motion passed. We will close this public hearing at 10:53.
Thank you. We still have one more.
It's not done yet.
You gotta still have to do the zoning.
Mayor, do you have?
It won't take.
Do we have a motion to approve first reading of ordinance number 1094?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion.
I did want to say something, and I will be brief.
Sure.
I appreciate, I'm talking to the audience of neighbors. I appreciate the context, they're very civil contacts that I had, phone calls, emails, letters that I read that was in the file. I will tell you that I did not have an idea where I was going to vote on this earlier today when I was asked. I had no idea. But I feel like after all the discussion, the things that the neighborhood was worked up over, Councilman Culp did cover. Mostly it had to do with speeding, which didn't affect this, which is not part of what we've been discussing or voting on tonight. We have been discussing it. There was one issue about density, and I agree that, it's kind of not great to increase the density, but in this case, we are providing a service to people who desperately need it, the 55 and older, and even older than that want to be part of the Brio community. And so it was very tough for me, but I am going to be voting for this.
And I would add, just on the issue of the density, it is an increase, but it is, to me, such a slight increase. It's not a radical change in the density. And to me, that's why I too, have comfort level on it. So, enough said. Thank you.
I'll just add that I think that, we probably spend over an hour discussing this particular item. And I think that, I do appreciate all of the neighbors coming in this evening and sharing their concerns with us. I think we had a healthy discussion of those concerns. And I think that they raised a lot of issues that we can address outside of the particular, item that we have before us this evening. Again, we wouldn't have been aware of all of those concerns if this particular proposal hadn't come forward. So it was good that they were here and they shared those concerns with us. So I do appreciate their input this evening. Anything else, council? Well, we have a motion and a second. Sam, vote please.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Ready.
Yes.
Motion passed. Now you may. Anything else to come before the council this evening? If not, we are adjourned.
My